Chapter 969. Deactivating the remote projection, Han Zhao's vision returned to the room. Before he could do anything, an emergency mission from the dynasty popped up on his interface. It was to accept the call to participate in the war against the Kundi race. The mission was to take the position of the Black Star Corps and follow the dynasty's orders to carry out all kinds of war missions. The format was similar to the secret war mission, and Han Zhao was not unfamiliar with it. According to the reward of the secret war mission, if I complete this mission with a high evaluation, there should be a high chance of obtaining legendary points, political assets, and the like, as well as creating a new dungeon. Oh right, my contribution points will also increase greatly. Han Zhao stroked his chin and was not very sure. After all, in the secret war, Purple Crystal and Clent were equally matched, and the Kundi race this time was just a slightly dangerous enemy to the dynasty. There was no suspense in getting rid of them, and the rewards might not be as high as the secret war. However, he did not insist on it. His goal this time was to try and activate all kinds of missions from Nero. Although he did not intend to take action personally, Han Zhao did not intend to slack off completely. He did not mind providing virtual technology support when the dynasty needed it. Furthermore, he had the advantage of being familiar with the map, and Han Zhao did not intend to hide it. The map that he was talking about was not a star map. The astronomical observation equipment of a universal civilization was not bad, and the Crimson Dynasty had already drawn up a star map of the flickering world before the first exploration phase. What they needed to explore was the details of the various aspects, such as the actual situation of each planet. What Han Zhao was familiar with was the territory of the Kundi race. This naturally would not be marked on the unexplored star map. In other words, with the support of his intelligence, the dynasty did not need to explore slowly but could directly enter the heart of the Kundi race. Of course, the prerequisite was that the dynasty believed in his intelligence. In terms of war, even if a Beyond Grade A had a high status, they would not be able to interfere with the orders of the dynasty. With regards to unconfirmed intelligence, be it the dynasty or the other advanced civilizations, they would all take a wait-and-see attitude. Han Zhao didn't have much to worry about. He already had the title of a scammer, and he had Aesop, a famous old man at home. In addition, the Empire would also use a large number of prophets, so it wasn't a problem for him to release information. However, in order to prevent those with ulterior motives from framing him for colluding with the Kundi race, Han Zhao could not give the dynasty too detailed information. Although he could do whatever he wanted with his current position, he could always avoid unnecessary trouble by being more careful. A star cluster level war, huh? This is my second time participating, but it's different from the secret war. Han Zhao let out a sigh of relief. The secret war was a proxy war. Although the scale was rather large, there was no concern for the survival of the race. This time, however, they were about to face a star cluster civilization that was going all out to protect their homeland. The enemy would not stop at nothing. Even if the Kundi race was a native star cluster level civilization, the intensity and scale of this war was not something that any of the wars he had participated in before could compare to. Han Zhao did not have any enmity toward the Kundi race, but he did not have a good impression of them either. If he was in the Kundi race's shoes, he would also not be willing to let an unknown civilization occupy the resources that he could easily obtain. When the Red Empire finished exploring the Dust Light star cluster, it would be equivalent to sealing the Kundi race within the Dust Light star cluster. In the future, the Kundi race would only be a star cluster level civilization. However, he was currently standing on the side of the dynasty, and he had a vested interest in this matter. The dynasty was exploring a new star field to obtain new resources, and it was impossible for them to stop. It could only be said that there was an irreconcilable conflict between the two parties. Since both parties were not in the wrong, the only ones at fault were the losers. Han Xiao wrote a message and included the intelligence of the Kundi race. He then sent it to Terekov, and without waiting for a reply, he wrote a war mobilization order and informed the entire army. Summoning us back to participate in the war? In the Black Star Corps exploration spaceship, the members of the team took out their communicators and looked at it. Some were excited, some were solemn, some were eager, and some were depressed. Nero was a member of this exploration team, and when he saw the army mobilization order, he immediately became nervous. The war had come too suddenly, and he was not mentally prepared. All along, he had only participated in various sparring sessions and had never participated in a real war. It was impossible for him not to be nervous. All sorts of thoughts appeared in his mind, and Nero could not help but let his imagination run wild. Will I be able to do it when facing the enemy? What does it feel like to kill the enemy? Will I be killed by the enemy? Is Mia going to participate in the war as well? Will she be in danger? Just as he was thinking about this, he felt a weight on his shoulder. Raising his head, Nero saw that it was the captain of his team, a former freelance mercenary. "Don't worry, kid. We will take care of you." The captain smiled. "Relax." The vice captain, who was reciting spell models, also looked over and casually said, "I participated in the secret war before, and the battlefield is actually just like that. It's either you kill me or I kill you, especially in this kind of galactic war. Death is just a matter of an instant and there is no pain. Thus, there is nothing to be nervous about." Hearing this, Nero scratched his head and revealed a bashful smile. He was assigned to this team as a mechanic, and his life was not bad. The captain and vice-captain both took good care of him, and the other members treated him well. In this kind of basic combat team, one's background was secondary. The most important thing was one's ability. Nero was not weak, and his mechanical skills were outstanding. He was trustworthy, and thus the other members were willing to take care of him. Nero also liked this group of forthright warriors. Although he was nervous about participating in the war, Nero did not have any intention of contacting Han Xiao. He did not want to ask for special treatment. If he did so, his godfather might agree to not let him participate in the war, but he would definitely look down on him. After learning for so long, Nero did not want to disappoint his godfather. Nero walked to the side and took out his communicator. After hesitating for a moment, he dialed Mia's number. After a few rings, the other party picked up, but no one spoke. They could only hear each other's breathing. After waiting for a few seconds, Nero could not help but take the initiative to speak. He scratched his face and said, "Have you seen the internal notice? I'm going to the battlefield." Aren't you worried about me?" "What's there to be worried about? I've been drafted as well." Mia snorted. Nero's heart skipped a beat and he hesitated. Are you nervous? What's there to be nervous about?" Mia's tone was strange. "When I became a super, didn't I already know that this day would come? I'm looking forward to it." Nero opened his mouth, but he had nothing to say. He could only say softly, "Then be careful. We are not in the same team, and I can't protect you. Who needs your protection?" Mia rolled her eyes. "You should take care of yourself. Don't die." After saying that, the call was cut off. Nero put down the communicator and rubbed his nose helplessly. He still missed the cute and shy Mia when he first met her. Ever since she had awakened as a pugilist, Mia's violent tendencies had become more and more serious. He did not know if it was because she had released the personality that she had suppressed for many years. There was no wall in the world that did not have a crack. Furthermore, the Red Empire did not hide anything. Not long after, the news of the flickering world spread to the explored universe, and the various star fields knew that the Red Empire was mobilizing for war. The majority of the galactic residents did not have any special opinions. Dealing with the natives was nothing strange. They could not wait for the dynasty to get rid of their opponents and complete the exploration as soon as possible so that they could have fun in the flickering world. There was also a group of anti-war factions that pitted the natives and called for peace instead of war. However, no one cared about them, and these words could not affect the actions of the advanced civilizations. Most of the organizations did not care, but the various supercluster civilizations were happy. They could not wait for the Kundi race to cause huge trouble for the dynasty. With the primordial psionic energy, the Kundi race would have the ability to kill the dynasty. The more of the dynasty's troops that died, the better. If possible, it would be best if the dynasties beyond grade as died. The exploration of the Dust Light star cluster had been stopped, and the dynasty and its allies were gathering their fleets near Planet Lighthouse. Apart from the exploration army, the Red Empire also sent elites from the central galaxy to the flickering world to participate in the battle. On one hand, it was to not underestimate the enemy, and on the other hand, it was to train the troop. In the explored universe, they would not encounter a war of this level often, and it was a good opportunity to train the elites that the army wanted to nurture. This time, because Han Xiao would not be participating personally, the commander of the Black Star Corps fleet was Herluz, who had left his friends behind and rushed over from the Shattered Star Ring. The army this time is divided into many armies. I'm the commander-in-chief of all the armies, and I'm in charge of the strategy. Every army will have an exclusive commander to lead the various allied organizations. The dynasty commander in charge of your Black Star fleet has also been decided. In the commander's office on Planet Lighthouse, Terakov opened a resume and showed it to Herluz. Looking at it, Herluz felt that it looked familiar. Tenny A. Menlos? That's right, it's him. His military rank doesn't seem high. Will he be able to do it? Herluz was confused. Don't worry about that. He's an officer that the dynasty is currently nurturing, and he has outstanding commanding abilities. Terakov smiled. He arrived at Planet Lighthouse not long ago. You can meet him. As he spoke, Terakov knocked on the table, and the door was pushed open. An officer with an imposing aura walked in, followed closely by his adjutant. We meet again, my friend from the Black Star Corps. The officer nodded. So, it's you. Herluz immediately recalled when he saw this person. This person was an elite of the dynasty who had been modified by the evolution cube, the future dynasty marshal, and had a short relationship with Han Xiao back then. The adjutant beside him was his trusted aide, Corvus. Herluz stood up, and the two of them shook hands before sitting back down. I haven't seen Black Star in almost 10 years, Tenny said. I heard that his position is getting higher and higher. I'm very happy. Herluz nodded and asked curiously, You've been promoted in the past few years? I remember that you were only a colonel when you came. I made some contributions, but those achievements are nothing compared to Black Star. Tenny shook his head. This time, I volunteered to be the dynasty marshal of the Black Star fleet to help you reduce the casualties. Thank you very much. Herluz was pleasantly surprised. As an ally, he was most afraid of meeting an unreliable dynasty marshal. You don't have to thank me. You can take this as repayment. Tenny waved his hands. Back then, Black Star gave me a mechanical floating defense array personally built by a Beyond Grade A, which helped me get through a few dangerous situations. I should be thanking him. I see. Herluz was enlightened. There was no such thing as love for no reason. It turned out that his boss had helped him before. He could not help but be impressed by Han Zhao's ability to build relationship. After this battle, I'll visit Black Star in the Geras Star cluster. I hope he'll be free. Tenny nodded. Don't worry. The matters of the army are basically handled by us officers. He's very free. Herluz sold Han Xiao out. The two of them chatted for a while until Terakov purposely coughed. The two of them then left the commander's office together. As comrades who were about to fight side by side, the two of them wanted to interact more with each other. People were coming and going in the base. On the way, Tenny bumped into an acquaintance, who was also a high-ranking imperial official conscripted from other places. They greeted each other and stopped to chat. Herluz did not pay much attention to it at first, but he suddenly realized that the tall and skinny adjutant beside this official had been staring at him with a meaningful gaze. "Looking at me? Ahem, why are you looking at me?" Herluz could not help but ask. This adjutant smiled, pointed at Herluz's army uniform and asked, "You're from the Black Star Corps?" "I'm the commander of the Black Star Corps fleet, Herluz." "How should I address you?" Herluz nodded. "Hee, call me God." "Have we met somewhere before? Why are you staring at me?" Herluz was confused. God smiled. "No, I've always admired Black Star. This is the first time I'm seeing a Black Star Corps officer, so I'm a little curious." Then, he turned around and did not intend to continue talking. Seeing this, Herluz did not reply. He sized this person up and was secretly surprised. This guy called God clearly did not have any aura, but for some reason, Herluz felt an inexplicable pressure in his heart when standing next to him. At this time, Tenny also finished chatting with his acquaintance. The other party left with God. Herluz watched as the two of them disappeared around the corner. He could not help but ask, "Do you know that adjutant?" Tenny shook his head, but his adjutant, Corbouz, who had been following beside him, spoke up. "You mean God? I know him. What's wrong?" "I chatted with him just now. I'm a little curious." Corbouz nodded and introduced. "This God is not a graduate of the Imperial Military Academy. He hasn't been in the army for long, but he's a super with extraordinary potential. He was chosen by that officer just now and became an adjutant. He's very outstanding in all aspects. I heard that he's also on the military's priority list." This resume sounds quite normal. Herluz felt that it was weird. He did not know where the pressure came from, but he was sure that it was not an illusion. However, there was no need to dwell on such a small matter. Herluz continued to chat with Tenny and soon forgot about God. The dynasty's efficiency was extremely high. It did not take long for the army to gather. Under Tarakov's instructions, the army officially set off and headed toward the depths of the dust-light star cluster. Originally, the dynasty did not know the exact location of the Kundi race's territory. The original plan was to scout the area first. However, Black Star had submitted a report not long ago and marked out the rough location of the Kundi race in the dust-light star cluster. Although there were no detailed coordinates, it saved the dynasty a lot of effort. Although the accuracy of the report was still unknown, the dynasty could also conduct more targeted reconnaissance. Countless scouts were released and headed toward the Kundi race's territory marked out by Black Star. The various armies also started to move in different directions. With an entire star cluster as the battlefield, mobility was the key. The Stargate was the blood vessel that connected the army. Because of the primordial psionic energy trap, the dynasty also acknowledged that the enemy had Stargate technology. Thus, the various armies paid attention to protecting their own Stargate to prevent the enemy from ambushing them. However, the army advanced for more than half a month without encountering a single battle. The enemy was in the dark, and they were in the light. It was as though the enemy had disappeared without a trace. This situation was only broken a few days later, and the dynasty finally had their first exchange of fire with the Kundi race. And the location of the exchange of fire was actually Planet Lighthouse, which was plagued with disasters. Chapter 970. Half an hour ago, in a desolate universe belt far away from Planet Lighthouse, a Kundi race fleet jumped out of the Stargate and quickly split into many groups. They entered hyperdrive mode and headed toward Planet Lighthouse along different routes. After the destruction of the Radiant Federation and the Arcane Church, the Red Empire had expanded the security perimeter around Planet Lighthouse by many times. Not long after this Kundi race fleet appeared, they were discovered by the surveillance equipment in the area. However, this Kundi race fleet ignored them and continued forward. The command room of the main ship was mainly crystal blue and dark gray, and the various control panels were suitable for crustaceans. The commander of the fleet was a large lobsterman that was much bigger than the ordinary members of the Kundi race. There were fiery red stripes on his shell. The Kundi race was also split into different races, and one of them had a special characteristic. When they were in a different mood, some parts of their shell would change color. The red stripes represented anger and agitation. This commander was currently in a state of anger, and the target of his anger was the enemy, the Red Empire. Yelu, an officer of the Kundi race who was known for his radical style, had volunteered to participate in this attack. He and the majority of the crew members of this fleet knew that there was an 80% chance that they would not be able to return. However, they still did not hesitate. "How far are we from Planet Lighthouse?" Reporting to the commander, "There are still about 4 hours left. Increase the speed." Yelu's tone was filled with killing intent, and he could not wait to unleash the cannonballs on the enemy. It had only been a few years since the Kundi race obtained the Stargate technology and advanced hyperdrive engine. Even if the productivity of a star cluster civilization was high, it was impossible for them to have a large number of troops. Furthermore, the Kundi race did not have enough experience in using these two technologies. Until now, many of the Kundi race soldiers were still not used to these new technologies. 4 hours of travel was naturally not enough to achieve the effect of a sneak attack. However, this was already the limit of what the Kundi race could do. Their stealth troops could only place the Stargate at this location. Any closer and they would not be able to hide it. However, this fleet did not care about being discovered. They adopted a plan of attack. In the data of the fallen spaceship, the location of Planet Lighthouse and the approximate security perimeter were marked, stating that this was the command center of the Red Empire. The Kundi race had confirmed the authenticity of this through long-range observation. As such, they had come up with this plan to take advantage of the fact that the Red Empire had sent out most of their troops to attack them and try to attack the Red Empire from behind. If they were to fight head-on, the Kundi race knew that they would not be able to survive. Thus, they could only take the risk. If they could destroy the core of the enemy, they would gain the upper hand, and the enemy would lose an important path of retreat. This fleet was equipped with a large number of primordial psionic energy weapons, and the Kundi race was extremely confident in the prowess of these weapons. As long as they were able to get close to Planet Lighthouse and hit the planet with one of these weapons, their strategic objective would be considered a success. The primordial psionic energy weapons practically ignored all defenses, and most of the shields would only be assimilated by them to provide energy for their expansion. Although they knew that they would not be able to survive, all of them, including Yelu, were extremely firm in their beliefs and were not afraid of death. On one hand, it was because of their anger and enmity toward the dynasty. On the other hand, it was because of the fear in their hearts. The reason for their fear was coincidentally related to Han Shao. Originally, the Kundi race was extremely careful about hiding their location due to their disadvantage in terms of combat strength. As long as they did not expose their territory, they would be able to make use of the strategic depth of the dust-light star cluster to do many things. However, the Red Empire's army actually did not do much scouting after setting off for half a month and headed straight for their territory. This disrupted the Kundi race's plans and made them panic. With their territory exposed, most of the Kundi race's preparations would be rendered useless, and all of their troops would be placed in a dangerous situation. Countless people were thankful that they had sent away most of the civilians early. Otherwise, they would be in an even more passive position. Left with no choice, the Kundi race could only resort to this plan. Since their base had been exposed, the Kundi race planned to use a surprise force to destroy the dynasty's path of retreat. The instigator of this was Han Shao, who had provided the intelligence to the dynasty. He had helped the dynasty save a lot of effort and forced the Kundi race to take the risk. In the command center of Planet Lighthouse, Terekov and all the officers were gathered in the command room and looked at the star map on the virtual screen. The red dot that marked the Kundi race fleet was slowly approaching, and there was a countdown timer on the top right corner. Just as everyone can see, the enemy has launched an attack on Planet Lighthouse and will arrive in 3 hours. Terekov stood with his hands behind his back and looked at everyone with a calm expression. Everyone's expression was normal, and they were not surprised at all. This situation was one of the possibilities that they had deduced, and they had already prepared a countermeasure. In Terekov's strategic sandbox, the enemy had almost no chance of winning in a direct battle, and the probability of them taking the risk was as high as 95%. During the exploration era, the Red Empire had been ambushed countless times, and they were extremely experienced. Not only were the officers not panicking, they even felt like laughing. Compared to veterans like them, this indigenous civilization with little experience in war was still too inexperienced. Their every move was within their expectations. Without the multidimensional sky-opening transportation device, they still wanted to ambush them? Without the life of the Radiant Federation, they had gotten the illness of the Radiant Federation. Planet Lighthouse was filled with calamities, and they were all used to others coming straight for them. After the previous lesson, even if they sent out a large number of troops, they would still retain a sufficient fleet on Planet Lighthouse. Furthermore, the expanded alert range would cause the enemy to take a longer time to reach Planet Lighthouse. A few hours was more than enough for Geru, Renault, and Crown to rush over through the stargates. Even the army that was sent out could return through the stargates along the way. Everyone is aware of the situation. The only threat of the enemy's ambush is the primordial psionic energy weapons themselves. Terekov paced around and slowly said, "We have plenty of time to prepare, so we have to destroy all the incoming troops. If any of the enemy ships get close to Planet Lighthouse and drop the primordial psionic energy bombs, we will be in trouble. I request to use the primordial psionic energy." Just like Black Star said, it is impolite not to reciprocate. An officer from the hardline faction sneered. Sure. Terekov nodded. The explored universe prohibited the use of the primordial psionic energy, but since the enemy had already used it, the dynasty would not hide it anymore. Since they were going to be contaminated anyway, there was nothing to be worried about. However, while this killing weapon was allowed to be used, Terekov had other plans. The destructive power of the primordial psionic energy is too great. If possible, try to use conventional weapons to fight and capture the enemy's spaceships and people. This is a good opportunity to obtain information about the enemy. Don't forget, we still know almost nothing about their civilization. Also, get the virtual mechanics to be on standby. We should be able to use them. The dynasty had a large number of virtual mechanics themselves, and they did not intend to rely on the strength of their beyond grade A allies to deal with such a primitive civilization. After all, Black Star's appearance fee was still quite high. After realizing that the enemy was planning to ambush them, Planet Lighthouse gathered the various garrisons through the Stargate and sent them out to intercept the Kundi race's fleet. Not long after, both parties encountered each other in the desolate universe belt near Planet Lighthouse. This time, it was not as peaceful as the regular canon exchanges in the explored universe. Both parties were crazily throwing primordial psionic energy at each other, as if they were throwing dung bags. In the universe, the primordial psionic energy did not expand that quickly. After all, it did not have an entire planet for it to devour. However, it was still dangerous because it would not dissipate. The primordial psionic energy balls of light stayed in the battlefield for a prolonged period of time, turning into obstacles that would kill anyone who came in contact with them. The primordial psionic energy balls could only keep on expanding, releasing a huge suction force that swallowed up all sorts of broken parts of the spaceship. They were like miniature black holes. In such a complicated battlefield, Everyone was wary of the other party's long-range attacks, and the frequency of boarding battles increased. The dynasty was the one taking the lead, and the Kundi race only wanted to bombard the other party with all their might. Reporting to the commander, the enemy has boarded the spaceships 078, 075, and 102. The guards on the spaceships are unable to defend at all. In the command room of the Kundi race flagship, the virtual screen was showing the scene of the supers slaughtering the armored Kundi race soldiers. Looking at this scene, Yi Lu said with an unfriendly tone, "These are the supers mentioned in the information? There's actually a method to obtain supers without genetic modification? Commander, the battle is not in our favor. What do we do now?" Hearing that, Yi Lu looked at the entire battlefield. There was a difference in the technology and military strength of the battleship, and the fleet had suffered heavy losses. While this operation was no different from a suicide attack, they had not even seen the shadow of Planet Lighthouse and had already lost so many people. Everyone looked at him, as if they had mentally prepared themselves for something. Yelu gritted his teeth and slammed the table. His tone was ferocious. "It's my honor to fight alongside all of you. Listen up, activate the spacetime splicers." On the other side, Han Xiao had already received the news when the battle started, and he descended from Planet Lighthouse to observe the situation. The dynasty's attack on the Kundi race fleet could be said to be extremely easy, and the enemy did not have much ability to retaliate. The difference in battleship technology was not something that could be made up for so easily. In the command room, Terekov was calmly commanding the battle while Han Xiao was just watching by the side. Seeing that the battle was going well, Han Xiao was a little confused. "That's weird. The Kundi race doesn't seem to be able to withstand a single blow. How did they cause so much trouble for the dynasty in my previous life?" The current situation was different from what he had expected. In his previous life, since it was written that the Kundi race had caused trouble for the dynasty, they should at least be able to fight back. Why was the enemy so weak? A group of virtual mechanics was currently trying their best to crack the firewall of the Kundi race battleship, and their progress was gratifying. In another 10 minutes or so, they might be able to capture an entire fleet without him taking action. The Kundi race does not have a chance to make a comeback. Strange. Han Xiao mumbled to himself. Just as he was deep in thought, the virtual mechanic team beside him suddenly exclaimed in surprise, and they hurriedly said, "Chief Commander, we have a problem on our side." Terekov looked over and asked, "What's the problem?" In that instant, the quantum network node of the enemy fleet disappeared, and we were unable to receive any signal. The virtual intrusion was automatically stopped. Before Terekov could think about it, a strange scene occurred on the battlefield. All of a sudden, all the Kundi race battleships seemed to have frozen on the spot. The dynasty's fleet would not be in a daze and focused their firepower on Yelu's battleship, destroying more than half of the battleships. Right at this moment, a change occurred. White noise and subtle spatial distortions appeared on the exterior of these destroyed battleships. Before anyone could react, these spaceships suddenly became intact, returning to the state they were in before they were hit. At the same time, their positions shifted forward by a large distance. There was no movement at all, and they were in a state of stagnation. The dynasty's fleet hesitated for a moment before firing again, destroying these battleships. However, the same scene occurred again, and the Kundi race's fleet shifted forward a large distance again. This time, the dynasty fleet did not attack. After a few seconds, the Kundi race fleet suddenly jumped again, jumping a large distance forward. Similarly, they did not move at all. It was as though they had skipped frames. "What is this?" Terekov, who was watching the battle from afar, was shocked. Right at this moment, an ear-piercing alarm sounded in the room. Spacetime fluctuations detected. The degree of distortion is unknown. Matching database model. Match failed. There is no similar model in the database. Creating new file. At the same time, the dynasty's fleet also used all their means to attack. However, no matter how many times they destroyed these battleships, they would always return to their original state and move toward Planet Lighthouse again and again. Upon seeing this, Tarakov's expression changed, and he quickly adjusted his state of mind. He shook his head and said, "It seems like we have underestimated them." We really cannot underestimate any civilization." Everyone looked at each other with different expressions. They originally thought that this would be an easy battle, but they did not expect this native civilization to pull out an unknown technology that seemed to be related to spacetime. They did not know how they climbed up the technology tree. Just as the officers were bewildered, Han Xiao, who was on the other side, was also a little stunned. He subconsciously put down his crossed arms. He recognized this technology. However, he did not expect it to originate from the Kundi race. In his previous life, there was no description of this at all. This was one of the trump cards that the explored universe had used against the World Tree. Chapter 971. The same theory would often lead to different technologies. A universal civilization did not mean that they were omniscient and omnipotent. Just like how the three universal civilizations did not have their own unique technologies, the diversity of the civilizations also ensured the diversity of the technology tree. Han Xiao was very familiar with the special technology that the Kundi race had displayed. This was a technology known as spacetime splicing, which came from a branch of spacetime theory. Spacetime technology was very advanced but not rare. The three universal civilizations and even the various star cluster civilizations would more or less know some of it. Even in the super system of the mages, there were spacetime-related spells. For example, Lagi's Smash Varuto was one of them. However, spacetime splicing also had its own uniqueness. The three universal civilizations did not reveal the specific principles behind it in his previous life, and Han Xiao only had a rough idea. This spacetime splicing seemed to be an ability to travel through spacetime, but it was also very different. The way Han Xiao saw it, the reason the Kundi race fleet was able to recover time and time again was because they had used spacetime splicing to freeze the fleet in the state before it was destroyed. No matter how many times it was destroyed, it would be able to recover to its previous state. The movement of the fleet was another use of spacetime splicing. First, a trend of the fleet was set as a parameter and simulated in reality, building a spacetime model of the entire action from start to end. Then, it broke through the spacetime continuum and separated the continuous action model into many time points. To put it simply, it was turning the action of, "I want to do something," into a movie, and every time point was a frame of the movie. Then, he took out the time chain of this preset behavior and locked his own spacetime in it, cutting off the past and future, and only existing in the present of this time chain. He would jump at the time points separated by multiple time spans in the behavior model, and the movement process in the middle would be omitted. It would look like frame skipping. Because there was no process, the normal attacks of the dynasty's fleet would not be able to stop the Kundi race fleet. To put it simply, the fleet would transform into a high-ping warrior and move forward in a staggered manner. Even if the enemy hit the fleet, it would only hit the previous me. This technology had many unique uses in many aspects, but it was not without side effects. The spacetime axis of the main universe was a chain system that was so huge that it could not be calculated. No matter which point there was an abnormal change, it would be corrected in the end like a taut chain. For example, all kinds of spacetime delay and spacetime stop spells would quickly correct the distorted spacetime in the area they covered after the effects of the spells ended, allowing the spacetime coefficient to return to normal. Only the changed state of matter would remain, and the spacetime axis itself would not be affected. The side effect of spacetime splicing was that the spacetime axis would start to correct the spacetime continuum. Due to the forceful distortion of the spacetime attributes of these skipped objects, their state of existence had changed. It was equivalent to half a projection, which would constantly accelerate the collapse of both spacetime and matter. When the correction ability of the spacetime axis caught up to them, all the time points of the entire behavior model would collapse, and the entire timeline of the behavior model would disappear. Their existence would be wiped out like a bubble that had been popped, as though they had never existed in this world. They would be fixed on a timeline, and after completing the preset goal of the behavior model, they would also automatically disappear. Originally, the spacetime axis was a straight line that extended endlessly, but they had taken a segment from the spacetime axis and jumped from the spacetime axis to the segment. Their lives would only be left with the process of the segment from the start to the end. This meant that when this technology was used, the fleet would have already died and become ghosts that could disappear at any time. I remember that when the three universal civilizations used this technology in my previous life, they were equipped with a large number of spacetime stabilizing anchors and many auxiliary devices. Only then could they greatly delay the time of the collapse. If the dynasty obtained this technology from the Kundi race, then with the dynasty's technology, they would definitely have improved it over the course of several versions. Therefore, based on these two reasons, the spacetime splicing technology in the hands of the Kundi race should only be the most crude version 1.0. The side effects are more severe and it's easier to deal with it. Han Zhao's expression changed slightly, and he pondered in his heart. Being attacked by the natives during the exploration should have only caused trouble for the dynasty, but now the dynasty could even obtain a very good spoil of war. He did not know if the stowaways who secretly gave the technology to the natives knew that the Kundi race had this technology. Although the stowaways had investigated the strength of the Kundi race before giving the technology, the spacetime splicing technology was definitely a highly confidential technology of the Kundi race and would not be discovered so easily. Stowaways into the flickering world were no different from suicide squads. Those supercluster or star cluster civilizations would not send calamity-grade supers to carry out such a mission, so the stowaways would not have too many people. If they don't know, then they would have suffered a huge loss. They wanted to drag the dynasty down but ended up giving them a treasure instead. Han Xiao chuckled in his heart. On the other side, Terekov also did not rest and quickly made his arrangements. As an experienced officer, Terekov had seen all kinds of situations. Although he did not know the theory behind the spacetime splicing technology, since the alarm said that it was a spacetime issue, he would make use of the corresponding means. The dynasty's assets were more than enough to deal with all kinds of sudden situations. Very quickly, a dynasty fleet that was on standby on Planet Lighthouse set off. They were equipped with a large number of spacetime mages who were proficient in spacetime spells to intercept the Kundi race fleet. Normal attacks were useless, and spacetime spells were able to affect the Kundi race fleet to a certain extent. After the Second Dynasty fleet entered the battlefield, the situation quickly changed. The various spacetime spells and spacetime devices allowed the Kundi race fleet to travel slower and slower. The white noise on the surface of the Kundi race fleet also became denser and denser, which meant that the speed of the Kundi race fleet's collapse was increasing. Everyone calmly observed the situation in the command room. After resisting for a period of time, when they were about an hour away from Planet Lighthouse, the Kundi race fleet disappeared for the last time and did not appear again. A surge of energy burst out of nowhere and spread far and wide in the universe. There were no intense scenes, and the Kundi race fleet was annihilated just like that. Apart from the huge amount of energy released after the collapse, nothing was left behind. In the universe, even annihilation was nothing. However, when these people made up their minds, they must have felt rather tragic. Even though they knew that they were going to die, they still wanted to give the dynasty a beating. Han Xiaoxin shook his head as such a thought flashed through his mind. It's settled. Terekov placed his hands on the table with uncertainty. Chief Commander, the spacetime coefficient has returned to normal. There are no abnormalities with the radar, and we did not detect any enemies. This might be the side effect of the enemy's technology, and it shouldn't be perfected yet. Before we can confirm that the enemy is completely annihilated, do not let your guard down. Continue to scan the surrounding area. Also, activate the planetary shield of Planet Lighthouse. At the same time, keep all emergency escape routes open. If the enemy suddenly appears around the planet, we will be able to evacuate quickly. Terekov swiftly made the arrangements. Because he did not understand the enemy, he did not dare to let his guard down. However, Han Xiao knew that the enemy was already dead. He narrowed his eyes and thought to himself, in my previous life, the dynasty also obtained this technology from the Kundi race, but I did not have any news about it. This means that the dynasty has implemented very strict confidentiality measures and should not allow their allies to exchange for this technology. So I will have to obtain the spacetime splicing technology myself. It was rare for him to encounter such a powerful technology, and Han Xiao was tempted. Coincidentally, the dynasty still did not know the theory behind the spacetime splicing technology, and he could take advantage of the fact that the dynasty was not paying much attention to it. He might not be able to use it himself, but the members of the Black Star Corps might be able to use it under certain circumstances. Furthermore, not only could this technology be used on his own people, but it could also be used on his enemies. He wondered if the spacetime amber and spacetime splicing technology would work together, and what kind of effect would it produce. Han Xiao was a little curious. In the depths of the dust-light star cluster, an enormous Kundi race fleet was slowly moving through the universe. In the conference room of the flagship, the upper echelons of the Kundi race were seated. When they realized that the Red Empire was heading toward their territory, the upper echelons had decisively left their mother planet and moved together with the fleet. Since most of their race had already been transported away, they did not need to hesitate to temporarily give up on the colonial planet that they had been building for many years. We have lost contact with Yelu's fleet. The ambush plan has failed. Are they all dead? We can't be sure, but they should have used the spacetime splicing technology. This means that even the spacetime splicing technology is unable to deal with the Red Empire. Hearing the report of one of the upper echelons, everyone present was solemn. The Kundi race leader remained silent for a moment before slowly saying, "Let's use the scorched earth plan." Hearing that, everyone's expression changed. They had come up with many battle plans, and the scorched earth plan was their last resort. They had originally planned to only use it when they were certain that they would lose. However, they did not expect their leader to be so aggressive and use it right away. Thinking about it, the upper echelons present did not have much confidence in this battle. The main reason why they had stayed behind to fight was that they were not willing to give up their home to the bandits without any resistance. They also did not want the Red Empire to take over their home without paying any price. The Scorched Earth plan was to make use of the primordial psionic energy's ability to expand infinitely and use it to destroy many star systems, including their old home, so that the Red Empire would not be able to obtain anything. They would then retreat and chase after their race. However, personally destroying their old home was something that they could not accept psychologically. Sweeping his gaze around, the Kundi race leader saw that no one spoke. Since no one has any objections, let's begin the arrangements. As for the Red Empire's troops approaching, send out a fleet to engage them and stall for time. Slowly let them enter our territory and enter the range of the Scorched Earth plan. Everyone had a heavy heart. There was no turning back now that their home had been destroyed. The Scorched Earth plan required time and preparation. If they were to send out a fleet to engage the dynasty head-on, it would mean that many of their comrades would die on the front lines. A few days after the sneak attack on Planet Lighthouse, More Kundi race fleets appeared and began to engage in battle with the dynasty's troops that had infiltrated deep into the dust light star cluster. The army led by Teni also encountered more and more enemies. There was no lack of opportunities to fight, but what made Han Xiao feel helpless was that Teni was too good at fighting. Under his command, the fleet's coordination was extremely smooth, and they could easily end the battle from afar. There were not many opportunities for them to engage in close combat. Furthermore, Teni even consciously protected the members of the Black Star Corps, which made Nero feel even worse. After running around with the army for almost a month, Nero had not even touched the hands of a Kundi race soldier. If this continued, Han Xiao would not be able to hold himself back from invading the next wave of enemies and controlling the Kundi race to attack Teni. Thankfully, Teni did not allow Han Xiao to extend his claws so quickly. In another battle, the Black Star Corps finally took on the task of engaging in close combat. Nero finally welcomed his first time. Chapter 972. Somewhere in the dust light star cluster, the troops led by Teni suffered a new wave of attack. While shooting primordial psionic energy at the enemy, they sent out small assault ships to shuttle through the complicated battlefield and close in on the enemy. This was the nemesis of the Kundi race fleet that did not have any supers. In the previous battles, Teni had always allowed the Black Star Corps to do nothing. In order to balance out the opinions of the other organizations, he had allowed the Black Star Corps to take the lead in this small wave of enemies. In the complicated battlefield, a small battleship made all sorts of maneuvers, shuttling between the energy cannons while avoiding the expanding primordial psionic energy. Inside the cabin, there were many armed landing squads waiting for orders in the various assault cabins. Nero's squad was one of the squads deployed on this spaceship. The interior of the cabin was gray, and it was slightly dark. Only a row of red lights flashed at the top, dyeing everyone's faces red. On the metal walls of the cabin, there were electromagnetic discs emitting blue light. Nero's team members were split into two rows with their backs against the electromagnetic discs, allowing the back of their combat suits to be absorbed by the electromagnetic discs to stabilize their bodies. The spaceship was flying with great difficulty, and the cabin was trembling slightly. Outside the window, beams from the cannons flashed past, and Nero's face turned pale. "Kid, there's no need to be afraid. Our spaceship's mobility far exceeds the enemy's. They won't be able to hit us." The captain in the heavy mechanical suit laughed and patted Nero's shoulder. Normally, people who say such things would be in trouble the next second. Nero couldn't help but curse. There was a simulation course in the academy, and Nero was clear about all the things to take note of. However, facing a real battle, he still felt nervous. "This is the first time you're fighting alongside our team after joining us. Let us see your actual combat strength. Don't be a burden," the captain said. "Got it." Nero took a deep breath and clenched his fists. Waiting in the cabin was a torturous thing, and time seemed to drag on for a long time. Nero did not know how long had passed, but a notification suddenly sounded in the cabin. "Target locked. The cabin will be launched in 45 seconds. Please prepare for battle. I repeat, please prepare for battle." When the countdown appeared on the screen, Nero's heart skipped a beat. He turned around and saw that all of his teammates had tensed up. "This is the last equipment check," the captain shouted in a serious tone. Everyone was already prepared, but they still checked their mecha once more. Nero also activated his mecha once more. Right now, he was equipped with a special mech that he had personally modified. The second generation of the Earth could use a lot of resources to create a mech made from rare materials. Its performance was even better than the standard armor of the Black Star Corps. Although with Nero's identity, he could obtain armor made by higher-grade mechanics, he still preferred to study new blueprints by himself. This mech was based on the mountain ape that Han Xiao had once used. However, Nero didn't have such high mechanical skills, so he used a simplified version that he had personally modified. He named this mech Steel Ape, and it was mainly used for close combat. As a true brittle mechanic, the first thing that Nero considered when creating the armor was close combat ability. Under the influence of Han Xiao and Mia, Nero also had a soft spot for close combat. Nero's current grade was C+, but with perfect mechanical sense, and the normal mechanic talents that he had obtained over the years, his mechanic ability could reach grade B, and the quality of the equipment that he created would far exceed that of the same grade. Ready, 10 seconds countdown. Hearing the captain's shout, Nero took a deep breath and put on his mecha's visor. He and his teammates got into a battle stance. Rumble! The next moment, a huge propulsion force was applied to their bodies, and the cabin walls trembled violently as the cabin shot out. On the screen, the location of the target was marked, and the distance between them was rapidly decreasing. Bang! The entire cabin shook, and it bit into the enemy ship. The laser cutter quickly cut a hole in the outer armor of the enemy ship, and the cabin crashed into the enemy ship. The door opened, and in front of them was a messy passageway. Without any hesitation, everyone followed the captain out of the cabin and began to clean up the enemies on the ship. The enemy reinforcements arrived very quickly, and the team encountered a large number of enemies. The Kundi race warriors had all undergone genetic modification, and while they were not supers and did not have any special abilities, their physiques were not bad. Their basic attributes were around LV 25 to LV 45, which was between grade E and grade D. Coupled with their various combat armors, their combat strength was not weak. The team was blocked in the middle of a passageway, and the enemy reinforcements swarmed in from both sides. They held onto their guns and continuously fired at the center. Nero had long tossed out a compressed orb, which turned into a mini-fortress to protect the team. The walls of the fortress and the shield blocked the attacks of the Kundi race soldiers from both sides, and they returned fire from within the fortress. "Kid, not bad." The captain encouraged Nero before pointing at the vice-captain. "Launch an assault. I will be in charge of the front, and you will be in charge of the back. Nero, set up the cannons and mechanical soldiers at the back to provide cover for us." After saying that, the captain led his team members and charged out of the fortress, braving the cannon fire as they charged forward. The advantage of being a super was that their individual combat strength was far superior. As long as they charged into the crowd, they would be invincible. Nero calmed himself down and tossed out a large number of compressed orbs, which transformed into various cannons. 222. The cannons fired at the enemies on both sides to provide cover for his teammate. With the enhancement of his mechanical force, the power of his long-range weapons was extremely shocking, and they instantly tore apart the formation of the Kundi race soldiers on both sides. The shields and armor of the Kundi race soldiers were destroyed one after another, and their body fluids splattered all over the walls and floor. After killing a large number of enemies in an instant, a gray aura flowed into the mark of death on the back of Nero's hand. This was a small gift that Hela had given him a long time ago. The more enemies he killed, the more his mental strength would increase. Nero had only been able to use this mark at this moment. With the support of his firepower, his teammates easily broke through the formation of the Kundi race soldiers and slaughtered them all. Many of his teammates were impressed by Nero's performance and praised him in their hearts. This newbie's firepower is truly ferocious. Is an ordinary grade C mechanic so powerful? This kid has some capabilities. He is indeed related to His Excellency Black Star. The team quickly advanced, and the reinforcements of the enemy increased. All of them charged forward without fear of death, and the situation was extremely tragic. This was especially so for the pugilists led by the captain. Their fists and kicks were extremely heavy, and while they might not be able to shatter the armor of the enemy, the surging pugilist flames were more than enough to kill the Kundi race soldiers within the armor. The scattered corpses on the ground made Nero feel a little uncomfortable. Even though his mechanical suit was filtering the air, he could still smell the pungent smell of blood. The fearless attitude of the Kundi race shocked Nero, but he and his teammates did not hold back at all. All of the Kundi race soldiers that charged forward were basically killed for nothing. This was the first time that he was facing a real battle, so he was nervous. However, he did not pity his enemies. The army had a targeted education in this aspect. However, Nero was also excited despite his nervousness. He did not wish to stay at the back and provide cover fire. As a mechanic from the Black Star, his physical combat instincts were raring to go. He could not help but charge forward a few times, but he was afraid that he would be scolded by his teammates. Right at this moment, a cry of surprise sounded from the communication channel of his teammates. The Kundi race soldiers were attacking the Black Star army warriors who were close to them, and one of their teammates had his shield broken. He was instantly targeted, and the armor on his body was severely damaged. Black smoke rose from his body, and he staggered backward from the recoil. It was as though he had entered a temporary dazed state. The surrounding Kundi race soldiers pulled out their high-frequency daggers and pounced forward, pouncing on him and stabbing him with their daggers. His teammate was a grade C pugilist with a strong physique. His body was covered in flames as he fought and sent one enemy after another flying. However, an endless stream of enemies charged at him without fear of death. Both sides were entangled in a fight, and his body was stabbed a few times before he fell into a dangerous situation. Just when the nearby teammates were about to turn around and help, a black figure suddenly charged out from behind and knocked a large group of Kundi race soldiers away like a bowling ball knocking a bunch of bottles away. It was Nero, who could no longer suppress his desire to engage in close combat. The nearby Kundi race soldiers turned around and surrounded Nero. Nero's tactical screen displayed the trajectory of the enemy's attacks, and he followed the instructions to dodge and squat down. His movements were extremely smooth, and the enemy's daggers brushed past his mechanical suit's shield, creating a trail of sparks. Nero flicked out his wrist blade, and as he dodged, he continued to hack and stab. His speed was peerless, and his wrist blade sliced through the enemy's armor and body like tofu. The cold blade brought out waves of boiling blood as he killed all of his enemies. After helping his teammates out, Nero did not return to the back to focus on firing the cannons. Instead, he charged into the midst of the enemy and slashed them one after another, causing their formation to turn upside down. Looking at the enemies falling one by one under his wrist blade, Nero felt extremely satisfied. Indeed, a true mechanic should engage in close combat. This is the style of a mechanic. Seeing this scene, a look of surprise flashed across the captain's face. Although he knew that Nero was the strongest member of the team, they had never fought side by side before today, so he didn't have a good understanding of each other's abilities. Seeing Nero carving out a path of blood, the captain muttered in his heart, "What a mechanic! Why does he keep charging forward to engage in close combat for no reason? What's wrong with him?" In front of a group of supers, the Kundi race soldiers in the spaceship did not have much ability to resist. The battle did not last for long, and the enemy was quickly wiped out. Blue-green blood stains covered the entire command room, and all of the enemy's crew members were killed. Everyone kept their weapons and heaved a sigh of relief. Nero kept the compressed orbs and was in a daze, as though he was still reminiscing about the previous battle. Seeing this, the captain walked to Nero's side and grabbed his shoulder with a smile. "The battle just now was not bad. How do you feel? Are you still not used to it?" "I feel much better." Nero hurriedly waved his hands. After a true battle, his state was no longer as tense. Although he was a little nervous at the beginning, he gradually got into a good mood and felt more and more relaxed. The hand-to-hand combat was free and unrestrained, making him feel very comfortable. He did not feel any discomfort from killing. Firstly, they were of different species, so the psychological impact was not that great. Secondly, supers had a certain level of mental toughness and could easily accept all sorts of cruel scenes. Thirdly, after obtaining supers, their mentality would change, and they would want to use whatever ability they had. It's the first time, so it's normal to see some blood. You'll get used to it in the future. The captain's tone was casual. If you feel any discomfort, you can come and find me. I'll give you some advice for free. Thank you, but I don't need it. A smile appeared on Nero's face as he was slightly moved. After this battle, he couldn't help but feel a sense of camaraderie towards this small team. Their relationship had become much closer. Nero's first life and death battle was extremely smooth, and it gave him quite a bit of confidence. The battle did not last for too long, and the Kundi race fleet was defeated without any suspense. The dynasty's fleet quickly started to clean up the battlefield. In the main ship, Tenny looked at the spaceships sent by the Black Star Army that were basically intact and returned to the troop. He nodded calmly. He was very satisfied that the Black Star Corps did not suffer any casualties. As the commander, he had many ways to reduce the casualties of the Black Star Corps. He intended to repay Han Xiao. Beep beep. Right at this moment, his communicator rang. Tenny took a look, and his expression changed slightly. He immediately picked up the call and spoke with a respectful tone. Your Excellency Black Star, I was prepared to visit you after the battle, but I didn't expect you to take the initiative to contact me. We haven't talked in a long time, and I have something to ask of you. The one who called was Han Xiao. May I know why you're looking for me? Tenny did not like small talk and went straight to the point. I heard that you want to protect the Black Star Corps? Yes. Tenny nodded. Ah, this is what I want to ask of you. You don't have to protect my men too much. I sent them to participate in the battle, partly to participate in the recruitment and partly to train them. Han Xiao raised his brows and smiled. I understand. Hearing that, Tenny did not waste any more time. Since the main character had spoken, he would not reject. Also, I hope that you can take care of this person. Han Xiao sent Nero's information to Tenny with a strange smile. This kid is my student. I want him to train more. If it's convenient, try to give him more chances to fight. Also, if he encounters any accidents, I'll be the one training him. Don't find it strange. He felt that he still had some conscience and did not interfere with Nero's first battle to build his confidence. However, he was going to make a move after that, so he came over to inform Tenny first. Tenny looked at the information and nodded. I'll make the arrangements. Then, I'll have to trouble you. After the battle, I'll wait for you in the Garistar cluster. We'll have a good chat then. Okay. After ending the call, Tenny looked at Nero's information again and muttered to himself, Black Star's student, huh? I'll have to make arrangements for him. At the same time, the mixed army led by another dynasty official had also just finished a battle in another area. They cleaned up the battlefield and continued marching. The commander, who had just finished commanding a battle, went to rest, and the work was temporarily taken over by the deputy commander. As the adjutant of the commander, God also got a short break. After greeting his colleagues, God returned to his room, took off his officer uniform, and walked into the bathroom. Soon, the sound of water splashing could be heard. After taking a shower, God wrapped a towel around himself and walked to the mirror with his upper body naked. He carefully sized up his body. Pale skin, tall and thin, ordinary looks. Looking at the mirror, God raised his hand and touched the face in the mirror. A faint smile appeared on his face. A young body is so good. Chapter 973. In a galactic war, the support and supply routes that relied on stargates were very important. The dynasty's troops would constantly plant stargates along the way, forming a shortcut that allowed them to advance and retreat. In order to prevent the enemy from launching a sneak attack on these Stargate stations, the various armies would station a portion of their troops every time the Stargate was extended. Therefore, the deeper they went into the dust-light star cluster, the smaller the troops led by the dynasty's officers. As the aggressor, the dynasty had no choice but to drag the battle line longer. However, this was the advantage of having a large number of troops. As the size of the troops at the front lines decreased, the intensity of the battle also increased. Of course, the commander of each troop was a young officer with a bright future that the dynasty had transferred from all over the country. They all had rich galactic war experience. How luxurious was the lineup! Anyway, in Han Zhao's memory, almost all of these transferred officers were future upper echelons of the military. There were at least 3 of them whose authority was not below tennis, and they would lead the other large armies of the dynasty. Facing such a group of generals, the Kundi race was at a complete disadvantage. Even if the dynasty's troops were reduced, the Kundi race would still suffer defeat after defeat. After receiving Han Zhao's instructions, Tenny changed his previous style and began to let the Black Star Corps take on more missions. He also took special care of Nero, whom Han Zhao had mentioned. Basically, in every battle, Nero's large detachment would be given a crucial mission, which would fall on the heads of the various small teams. As a result, the battles became extremely frequent. Coincidentally, most of the graduates of the Super Academy belonged to different teams in this detachment. The continuous high-intensity and high-risk battles put a huge burden on these young students. Even Nero could not take it. He felt that it was strange and did not know how their detachment had offended the commander. Due to the continuous high-pressure battles, Nero's machinery was severely damaged, and close to half of his stock was gone. When there was no battle, he had no way to rest and had to repair his machinery bitterly, afraid that he would not have any equipment to use in the next battle. At this moment, Nero was extremely grateful to Reynold. "Isn't it just not sleeping? When I was forced to study, I had already cultivated this ability." This was not just a description but a talent on the interface. Advanced fatigue resistance. Plus 500% stamina recovery rate and minus 60% stamina depletion rate. Reduces the mental fatigue status caused by lack of sleep and rest. At most, it will accumulate to slight mental fatigue. For someone with good talent, to be able to cultivate a talent even without sleeping, Han Zhao did not know how to reason with him. However, the other graduates did not have Nero's inspirational experience and were extremely tired. Even Mia did not have the time to chat with him on the phone. Since Nero had no way of guessing the commander's thoughts, it was useless even if he cursed in his heart. He could only continue to fight and did not know that he had already been arranged by Tenny. High-intensity battles would lead to casualties, but that was how actual combat training worked. Losses were unavoidable. Nero's team was still fine. Although they were exhausted, none of their members had died. Through the frequent battles, Nero's bond with his teammates had become stronger. The Red Empire had an overwhelming advantage in this battle, and many days passed in the blink of an eye. The various dynasty fleets had already crossed many star systems and were finally approaching the borders of the Kundi race's territory. As the army approached, the scouts moved first. The various armies that were approaching the Kundi race's territory from different directions all sent out a large number of scouts to scout the Kundi race's territory. Among these scouts, there were unmanned fleets that could be controlled remotely and combat squads that carried the ground troop. Without any surprise, Nero's team was chosen to be the scouts to carry out the dangerous scouting mission. Just as the dynasty's troops were exploring the borders of the Kundi race, Han Zhao had secretly sent out a secret mechanical army that had followed his instructions and arrived near the Kundi race's mother planet. This was a black planet that looked like a desolate planet. There were a large number of armed reconnaissance satellites floating outside the planet's atmosphere, as well as sky camouflage equipment used to cover the planet's surface. Through the detection eyes of the mechanical soldiers, the true appearance of the Kundi race's mother planet could be seen. In fact, this was a sapphire-like planet. The ocean took up most of the surface area, and there were many floating cities on the surface. So, this is what this planet originally looked like. The mechanical soldiers stopped in space far away from the planet and activated their camouflage. With Han Zhao's technology and mechanical force, it was enough to prevent the Kundi race's mother planet from detecting the existence of these mechanical soldiers. One of the mechanical soldiers was Han Zhao's Lord's avatar, and it carried his consciousness. It was currently carefully observing this planet. In his previous life, after the flickering world was opened, Han Zhao had come here to complete a mission. At that time, the Kundi race's mother planet had already been completely modified by the dynasty. Because the dynasty had directly attacked the mother planet, the population of the mother planet had basically been evacuated. However, the Kundi race did not blow up the mother planet, and there were still many facilities left on it. Furthermore, a small fleet was stationed there to temporarily manage it. This was one of the core nodes of the Kundi race's quantum network. Get to work. Han Zhao twisted his mechanical neck, and with a thought, he entered the quantum network vision. His vision turned pitch black again, and only the light clusters representing the quantum network nodes were left. The brightness was different, and they were connected to each other by thin lines representing information flow, forming the structure of the network. Han Zhao directly locked onto the main quantum network node of the Kundi race's mother planet, and his consciousness turned into a stream of light. The firewall of the node appeared before his eyes like layers of dynamic data walls. In his eyes there were holes and gaps everywhere. He did not want to alarm the Kundi race, so he chose to dive into the data instead of directly invading. He easily passed through the holes in the firewall and opened the back door. The other party's quantum network technology was very weak, and all the confidential permissions were useless. It was like entering a house where the owner was not home, and the tools in his hands could open any room or safe. There was no need to ask. If he did, he would be doing whatever he wanted. Very quickly, all the defenses of the Kundi race's data vault were removed, and it appeared naked before Han Zhao's eyes like desserts waiting to be enjoyed. Philip, pack up and copy their database. Han Zhao instructed. His target was only the incomplete version 1.0 spacetime splicing technology. However, since he was already there, he might as well pack up all the data of the Kundi race and bring it away. Philip began to work. Copying the data of an entire star cluster would take some time. Making use of this time, Han Zhao took a look at all the objects that were connected to this node. Through the path tracking method, he would be able to locate the whereabouts of all the Kundi race's fleet. Let me see where the Kundi race's troops are. After importing the coordinates into the star map, Han Zhao's eyes suddenly moved, and he discovered some interesting information. The Kundi race's fleet was roughly split into 4 groups. The core fleet, with the command center as the main fleet, was hiding within the territory, waiting for orders. The second fleet was blocking the dynasty's troops at the front lines. It was normal for them to have opened up a battle line at the border. The third fleet was carrying the civilians and evacuating, which was already far away from the Kundi race's territory. What caught Han Zhao's attention was the fourth fleet. Countless small teams were heading toward the border of the territory in other directions, as though they wanted to form an encirclement. However, from such a far distance, it was clearly not a normal encirclement. It seemed like they were carrying out a special mission. With Han Zhao's current knowledge, of course, he would not be confused. Very soon, he had a guess. In such a situation, there should only be 3 possibilities. The first is to escape, the second is to cover the civilians as they evacuate, and the third is to set up a special trap. Escaping can be ruled out, but the civilians evacuating in the opposite direction can also be ruled out. In that case, the most likely possibility is to set up a trap. As for the trap, Han Xiao narrowed his eyes. According to the methods that the Kundi race could use and the specific situation, the enemy's most likely plan was to bury a large amount of primordial psionic energy at the border of the territory and cause it to expand, allowing it to devour all the celestial bodies within the territory, leaving nothing for the dynasty. This was not a random guess. There were too many examples of this during the exploration era. Wasn't the reason why so many artificial desolate universe belts were created because of the primordial psionic energy? So, the Kundi race wants to turn their homeland into a killing trap to lure the dynasty's fleet out. Whoa, that's quite vicious. They even want to take a bite out of the dynasty before escaping. Han Xiao shook his head. Only a civilization that did not know the dangers of the primordial psionic energy would use this thing recklessly. The formation of a natural celestial body required billions of years, and the probability was random. Wherever the primordial psionic energy passed by, it would devour all the celestial bodies, turning the universe into a desolate vacuum. No material resources could be found, and not a single blade of grass could be found. Furthermore, as long as the pollution was not dealt with, the primordial psionic energy would continue to expand endlessly. As its size increased, its contact area with the outside world would also increase, and the rate of expansion would also increase. If it expanded to a terrifying extent, it might not even be able to be dealt with. When that time came, all living beings could only race against the apocalypse. Another important reason why the three universal civilizations were so passionate about exploring the unknown was that they were afraid that there would be an unknown advanced civilization that would leave the primordial psionic energy and not deal with it, allowing it to expand endlessly. If that happened, it would only be a matter of time before the entire universe suffered. In the history of his previous life, there were no records of how the dynasty dealt with the Kundi race. Han Xiao did not know if the Kundi race had carried out the scorched earth plan previously. However, the celestial bodies of the dust-light star cluster in his previous life were very well preserved, which proved that even if the Kundi race had carried out the scorched earth plan, the dynasty had stopped it in time. After thinking about it, Han Xiao decided to pass this information to the dynasty. It would definitely increase his mission rating greatly. While the primordial psionic energy is terrifying, it needs a process to expand to a certain scale. The dynasty has more than enough time to deal with this problem. Han Xiao nodded and felt relieved. He was only there to copy the space-time splicing technology, but he did not expect to receive such an unexpected reward. After a while, Philip finished copying the data, and Han Xiao left behind a backdoor program. After cleaning up the traces of his visit, he deactivated the quantum network vision and ordered the mechanical army to return. The Kundi race mother planet quickly disappeared from the vision of the Lord's avatar. From the beginning to the end, his visit did not alert anyone. A pinnacle beyond grade, a virtual mechanic, was unparalleled in terms of stealing intelligence. He was an existence that even the three universal civilizations had to be wary of. At this moment, the upper echelons of the Kundi race, who had already been ransacked, were having a new meeting. The topic of the meeting was related to supers. In the room, the Kundi race leader looked at everyone and said with a deep voice, "The enemy's super technology has given their warriors powerful individual combat strength. According to the data of the spaceship that fell, this super technology is a method for individual life forms to train themselves. An individual can even have the strength to destroy a planet. The warriors that we are so proud of are simply unable to withstand a single blow from the supers." Everyone had a heavy heart. The super system was a technology that could only be discovered through luck, and the Kundi race was clearly on the blacklist of the goddess of luck, just like Han Xiao. The supercluster civilization behind the scenes had mentioned the existence of supers but did not give the cultivation method of the supers to the Kundi race. As a result, the Kundi race still did not have a super system. Supers are exactly what we lack. the Kundi race leader said slowly. Everyone, we have already decided to leave our home. If we can obtain this technology from the enemy, it will help us gain a foothold in our new home. What you mean is, I want the frontline troops to think of a way to capture some of the enemy's supers and use them as experimental materials. As long as we obtain their bodies, we will be able to research the principles and secrets of the super system. If that's the case, we will have to change the strategy of the frontline troops. Everyone gathered their spirits and began to discuss. Most people wanted to possess great strength and a long lifespan, not to mention that they were the upper echelons of the Kundi race. Strength had always been linked to authority, and if there was a superhuman strength, then the strength of a fist would be authority. They coveted the existence of supers, and not only did they want to use the Scorched Earth plan to destroy the dynasty's plans, they also wanted to snatch the new technology from the dynasty's hands. A few days later, at the border of the Kundi race's territory, a dynasty scout team was stealthily advancing. This scout team had more than 20 battleships, and the majority of them belonged to the Black Star Corps. Not only Nero, but even Mia and a large group of graduates were among them. They had been in the Kundi race's territory for a few days now, and they had maintained their vigilance along the way, ready to fight at any moment. However, they had yet to encounter any enemies. In the cabin of one of the battleships, a large group of army warriors was gathered around the star map and discussing the current situation. Nero stroked his chin and looked at the star map. He could not help but ask, "This is really strange. Before we entered the Kundi race's territory, we would encounter enemies intercepting us every day. Now that we have entered their territory, no one is coming to bother us?" Hearing that, everyone turned to look at him but did not say a word. Not far away, Mia stood with her arms crossed and raised her eyebrows. She joined the conversation and spoke in a confident tone. "Perhaps the enemies felt that they could not stop the dynasty and have all fled. I don't think it's that simple." Nero shook his head. This time, Nero's team and Mia's team were on the same battleship, and there were a few other combat teams on the same battleship. After experiencing the baptism of war during this period, Nero's combat strength had increased by a considerable amount. However, his temperament had not changed. After all, he still had a baby face, and no matter how one looked at him, it was still rather comical. On the other hand, Mia had proven her combat strength in actual combat, and her temperament had become more and more confident. Rumble. Right at this moment, the fleet arrived at their target location and exited their hyperdrive state. Outside the window was a planet, which was also the current target of their scout team. They were looking for a planet that was suspected to be a Kundi race colonial planet. On the surface of this planet, there were obvious traces of a city. Seeing that, everyone's face tensed up. "It seems like we have found the place. Everyone, be careful." Chapter 974. The fleet did not approach rashly and maintained their stealth state. They released a mini space-based surveillance satellite and allowed it to slowly approach the atmosphere of the planet, constantly scanning the surface of the planet. In the cabin, the virtual screen displayed the images of the satellite scan. There were many cities on the surface, but the streets were empty. There was a lot of trash on the streets, as though it was left behind by civilians who had left in a hurry. This colonial planet seems to have been abandoned. Nero's finger swiped across the virtual screen, constantly scanning the empty cities. "Let's look at the life signal detection." The captain pointed with his mouth. Nero nodded and switched to the control interface of the space-based satellite. This thing was a product of the army, and although he was not the one who had created it, it was extremely easy to control. There were about 2,000 soldiers in this scout team, and most of them were Grade C supers. Only the commander was a Grade B supers, and Nero was the strongest after the commander. He was also the best mechanic in this scout team, and he was basically in charge of all the mechanical devices in the team. Very quickly, the results of the scan were displayed on the screen. The life signals on the surface of the planet were sparse, and the densest were wild beasts. In the cities, there were only a few intelligent life signals. Mia's eyes sparkled. There are still people in the cities. They should be civilians who are unwilling to leave. Nero heaved a sigh of relief. Their mission for this trip was to capture as many Kundi race civilians as possible and bring them back for interrogation. Kid, confirm the armed forces of this planet. If there are no problems, we will land, the captain said. Nero nodded and scanned the planet. Everyone stared at the screen and waited for the result. At this moment, in the quantum network that no one could see, a set of data that had been lying in ambush for a long time had secretly intercepted the information sent back by the satellite, silently altering the intelligence that was displayed before everyone's eyes. There are no enemy spaceships nearby, and there are no abnormal reactions from the military bases on the surface. It seems like the enemy has completely abandoned this colonial planet and did not even leave behind any troop. Nero took a look and read out the results of the scan. The captain chuckled. That's easy. The commander has already given the order. Everyone, pay attention. We are about to land. The fleet moved quickly. Most of the warships broke through the atmosphere and began to descend toward the city. Only 3 warships, including the commander's spaceship, remained in outer space as support. At the same time, a medium-sized fleet of the Kundi race was resting in a floating military base in the sky of this colonial planet. There were about 100 spaceships, and the military base was in a camouflage state. The reflectors were turned on, and they blended into one with the environment. A large number of operators were busy in the main control room of the floating military base. A radar operator suddenly saw a signal of abnormal atmospheric fluctuations flash across the radar screen in the blink of an eye. However, when he took a closer look, the signal disappeared, indicating that everything was normal. Did I see wrongly? The Kundi race operator was puzzled and made the radar scan again. Not only was there no problem with the atmosphere, even Nero and the rest were not detected by the radar. It should be a false alarm. Seeing this, the operator looked away. The scout team did not discover this military base, and the military base did not see the scout team. They were right in front of each other, but they could not see each other. The mastermind behind this was the mechanical army that Han Xiao had hidden in the scout team's spaceship. He had used the virtual technology to tamper with the scan results of both parties. The situation had completely fallen into the Han technician's script. Not long after, the spaceship successfully landed in the city. The various combat teams put on their equipment and walked out of the spaceship, standing in the desolate streets. Come, let's assign the missions. The captains had a short meeting. In the end, all the teams were divided into 3 groups. One group stayed behind to guard the spaceship in case of accidents, one group went to capture the remaining civilians in the city and collect information in the city, and the rest spread out to search for special facilities nearby, such as various factories, energy plants, and so on. On the outskirts of the city, there was also an abandoned military base. After ascertaining their roles, the various teams split up. Nero and Mia's teams were in charge of exploring the abandoned military base in the outskirts of the city. They took a ground vehicle to their destination, which was a heavy armored hovering vehicle. In the carriage, the members of the 2 combat teams maintained their silence. Nero looked to his left and right before coughing. He then stood up and sat down beside Mia. Mia, who was maintaining her weapon, glanced at him before lowering her head and continuing to maintain her weapon. Why are you sitting over here? To chat with you. Nero scratched his face. We have been busy with the battle recently, so we haven't been able to talk much. What's there to chat about? Mia rolled her eyes and said with annoyance, You don't even have enough time to sleep. Do you think I don't need to rest like you? Nero was speechless. After thinking for a while, he said, Actually, I can teach you how to resist fatigue. I am very experienced in this aspect. Do I need you to teach me as a pugilist? Mia laughed. As a pugilist, you need to learn this ability even more. Mechanics don't need much stamina, but you guys are different. Without stamina, the combat strength of a pugilist will decrease greatly. I am afraid that you will encounter danger, Nero said seriously. You sure are concerned about me. Mia glanced at Nero. Didn't I say that I would protect you? Nero grinned. Humph, stop smiling. You look so stupid when you smile. Mia snorted and turned her head away. After a few seconds, she turned back and asked casually, How do I train that anti-fatigue you mentioned? Nero touched his nose and said seriously, First, you have to change your habit of sleeping. In a fatigue state, you have to keep your brain operating at a high speed. It is the most difficult at the beginning. I have experience and can help you. When you want to sleep, just look for me. Mia nodded and suddenly felt that something was amiss. Look for you when I want to sleep? Are you trying to tease me? Feeling embarrassed, Mia punched Nero's chest, causing a muffled sound to ring out. What did I say? Nero was confused. His armor was thick enough, so he did not feel any pain. Just as Mia was about to say something, she suddenly realized that everyone's gazes were focused on the two of them. Their gazes were filled with ridicule, gratification, envy, and many other emotions. It was as though they were looking at a pair of lovers flirting with each other. Mia glared at Nero and lowered her head in embarrassment. She lowered her head and no longer spoke. She lowered her head and maintained her weapon with all her might. She held onto the sharpener as though she wanted to create sparks on the weapon. Nero scratched his head and wanted to continue the conversation. However, he saw his captain, who was sitting diagonally opposite him, winked at him and started to sign. One of his hands formed a fist while the other extended a finger and poked into the hollow of his fist twice. This was a sign that could be used in the galaxy, and the meaning was self-evident. Kid, don't waste time. When it's time to go up, go up. Old hooligan. Seeing this, Nero could not help but mutter. Right at this moment, everyone's radar detected an abnormality. Beep beep. 2 abnormal energy sources detected. Everyone immediately retracted their smiles and checked their radar. There were 2 signals on the screen. One was pointing to the underground of the military base, while the other was pointing to the wilderness. That's weird. Why didn't we detect it earlier? Is this thing spoiled? The vice captain patted the radar and was puzzled. No matter what, we have to take a look. The captain swept a glance and said to Mia's team, Seems like we have to split up. When we reach the military base, let my team off first. You guys can check the abnormal signal in the wilderness. After finalizing the plan, the hover car quickly arrived at the outskirts of the military base. Nero's team got off the car and watched as Mia and her team drove off before the two of them separated once again. Kid, stop looking. Time to do something. Seeing Nero staring at the direction the car left, the captain snapped his fingers and got Nero to retract his gaze. Nero calmed himself down and caught up with his team members, but he was a little absent-minded. He did not know why, but in that instant, he felt a little uneasy. With a heavy heart, Nero followed his team to explore the military base. He found an abandoned elevator and arrived at the complex underground base. He then went to check the abnormal signal on the radar. Alert! Unknown target discovered. 10 minutes later, the Kundi race floating base in the sky was no longer blind. The cataracts that they had suffered for many years had been cured, and they suddenly discovered the scout fleet's spaceship that had landed on the surface. All the personnel in the base were given a shock and hurriedly took action. The report was quickly sent to the commanding officer of the base. In the office, the commanding officer's eyes widened in shock and anger. When did this group of enemies land? Why didn't we discover them earlier? Have you neglected your duty? The team leader in charge of the radar explained. The radar did not react at all. The enemy must have used advanced concealment equipment to avoid our detection. That's too scary. If they have such technology, they might have succeeded if they had ambushed this base. The commanding officer felt a lingering fear before raging. To sneak in, are they treating us as if we don't exist? Sir, think about it. The enemy has such capabilities, but they did not ambush us but landed on the surface instead. Why is that? Hearing this, the commanding officer's eyes flashed, and he slammed the table. I understand now. They know that we are here, but they did not ambush us. This means that they do not have enough manpower, and they do not have the confidence to kill us even if they ambush us. They actually dared to ignore us and gather intelligence right under our noses. They are too arrogant. We have to make them pay the price. After pausing for a moment, the commanding officer stood up and roared, "Order the fleet to move out and surround the enemy. Do not let anyone escape. Sir, try to capture them alive. The higher-ups want supers for research, and this is an opportunity," the adjutant beside him reminded. The commanding officer's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly said, "That's right, I almost forgot. The higher-ups want supers. These people are simply sending themselves to our doorstep. Capture them alive and bring them back to report." In the underground of the abandoned military base, Nero's small team was currently exploring the underground base. The power supply had long been cut off, and it was pitch black and incomparably quiet. Everyone could only hear each other's breathing and footsteps echoing in the empty corridor, giving off a rather frightening feeling. Nero released a few small mechanical pathfinder bees, which emitted a strong light to lead the way and illuminate the underground base. Without power, the entrance control of the base was completely ineffective, and they could only open it with brute force. A few high-energy heat cannons were enough to turn the tightly shut metal door into molten steel. After following the team for a while, Nero's intuition grew stronger, and he could not help but speak. "Captain, I feel that something is wrong." "What's wrong?" the captain asked. "I can't put my finger on it. It's just my intuition." "Is that so?" The captain frowned and made a hand gesture. "Bring a few people and follow behind to guard the path. I will go with the others to check the abnormal signal." After saying that, the captain picked a few teammates and told them to follow Nero while he led the others to continue forward. Nero waited for a while, and the captain's confused voice finally sounded in the communication channel. "We have already arrived at the source of the abnormal signal, but there is nothing here." Nero's heart thumped, and he hurriedly opened the shared vision to see the scene on the captain's side. It was an empty warehouse, and there was not even a strand of hair. However, the signal marked by the radar was in this place, and the height and distance matched perfectly. They were not in the wrong place. "Is it a radar error?" Nero swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Or boom! Before he could come back to his senses, a violent tremor erupted in the next moment. "Warning! High-energy attack detected. Please evade in time." Rumble! The sound of cannon fire rang in their ears, and the dome and pillars of the underground base suddenly collapsed. The structure of the base instantly fell apart and every floor shattered. The bottom became a black bottomless pit that led to an even deeper underground floor. Nero only had time to activate a shield to protect himself before he was sent flying by the shockwave of the explosion. He crashed into the wall of the corridor, and his body fell downwards. His teammates exclaimed in the communication channel, but he could not care less. At this moment, he could not even take care of himself, and his heart was filled with shock. How did they suddenly encounter an attack? They had clearly confirmed that there were no troops stationed on this planet. At this moment, Nero could not think of any other explanation. In his eyes, there was only one possibility. **T. This colonial planet is a trap. The enemy must have purposely set up an ambush somewhere else, and we have fallen into their trap." Just as this thought flashed through his mind, Nero crashed heavily onto the ground. Bang! A human-shaped crater appeared on the ground, and a large cloud of dust rose. "See!" The huge impact caused his entire body to tremble, and he could not help but groan. Before he could stand up, a large amount of rocks and metal fell with him, suddenly magnifying in his line of sight. Nero's heart skipped a beat, and he clenched his teeth and activated a shield to protect himself. Bang! 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 Countless debris fell down, covering every inch of Nero's vision and burying him completely. At this moment, in the abandoned city not far away, the Kundi race fleet had already started exchanging fire with the other battleships guarding the spaceship. Energy cannons shot out in all directions, piercing through the empty buildings one after another. Rumble, a large number of buildings collapsed, and smoke filled the air. There were also a few Kundi race battleships hovering above the abandoned military base. Their cannons were all opened, and their energy cannons rained down on the military base. Boom! 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 Only when the entire base was destroyed did these few battleships stop their attacks and put away their cannons. The hatch of the battleship opened, and the armored Kundi race soldiers jumped out of the cabin. They landed on the ground, adjusted their posture, and got into formation before heading to the underground base with their weapons. The life signals of Nero and the others were exposed to the radar of the Kundi race, and the goal of these soldiers was to capture this group of supers who were alone without the protection of a fleet. Good. The operation is going smoothly. At this moment, in the command room of the floating base, the Kundi race commander smiled with satisfaction. However, he did not know that a group of highly invisible mechanical troops were floating outside the window, silently staring at him. Chapter 975. Leave Request Mission Progress. 4/7. The health index of legendary mechanic is too low. Rest for a day, April 7th. Please wait for a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 976. When the bombing stopped, the abandoned underground base was already in a mess. The collapsed rocks blocked countless paths, and the originally complicated terrain became even more complicated. From time to time, the sound of rocks falling could be heard in the darkness. At the bottom of the base, smoke and dust filled the air. The large rocks and metal plates that had fallen formed a small mountain, burying Nero tightly. Suddenly, a sound could be heard in the darkness. It sounded like a sticky liquid flowing. Hoo-hoo! At the bottom of this pile of debris, an area with a diameter of about 2 meters gradually lit up with a red light. As the light grew brighter, the metal and rocks melted, revealing a hole. Nero limped out of the hole with his back hunched. His hands continuously shot out heat rays from afar, and the high temperature caused the surrounding air to distort. Cough, cough, cough. A muffled cough could be heard from the mechanical suit's mask. Nero took in a few deep breaths before doing a health check on the mechanical suit. Left leg bone is slightly dislocated. Do you want to allow the mechanical suit's structure to change automatically to correct it? Yes. The armor on his left leg tightened slightly to correct the misaligned bone. Nero let out a muffled groan before relaxing. Who knew how many tons of debris had smashed onto his body? His mechanical suit was fine, but the recoil had caused him some minor injuries. After all, he was just a weak mechanic. The radar showed that the enemy was right above him. Nero forced himself to calm down and hurriedly contacted his teammate. Captain, this is Nero. Where are you guys? How's the situation? A chaotic voice could be heard in the channel. There were also intermittent cries of pain. Nero called for quite a while before receiving the public message from his team. The situation here isn't good. A teammate's face popped up on the tactical screen. His face was filled with bruises and abrasions, and his tone was hurried. I'm beside the captain. When the base collapsed, the captain was hit by a cannon that penetrated through the ground. He's now heavily injured, and many people have been separated. No matter who receives this message, immediately save him and gather everyone here. We have to break out of this encirclement immediately. Nero immediately opened the team's health monitor. Seeing the screen filled with red, he was shocked. Everyone's injuries were more serious than his, and a few of them, including the captain, were on the verge of death. As they had fallen to the bottom of the base and been buried, he had managed to avoid the cannon fire and was the least injured. Without even thinking about it, the luck halo above his head was shining brightly. I'm the only one who's in perfect condition. Nero immediately felt the pressure on his shoulders increase. He gritted his teeth and immediately turned on his teammate's location. Every teammate's position was marked on the tactical screen. The mecha's AI worked at high speed, quickly planning the fastest rescue route. Nero flew out of the crater at the bottom of the base and started to rescue his scattered team members. The terrain was complicated, but he did not have the time to take a detour. He constantly shot out heat cannons from his palms, melting all the obstacles in front of him and saving his teammates one by one before the Kundi race's ground troops arrived. Only then did he meet up with the captain. After blowing apart the metal plates blocking his way, Nero flew into the room and landed on the ground with a clang. He saw his captain and the rest of his team members, all of whom were injured. The captain was slumped on the ground, his upper body leaning against the wall. His armor was charred black, revealing large holes. He looked up with difficulty, squeezed out a smile, and spoke weakly. "Nero, you're here. You did well, cough cough, well done. Captain, don't speak any more." Seeing this, Nero bent his fingers, and a short needle shot out from his fingertips, which he inserted into the captain's chest like a claw. Aurora's special life potion was injected into the captain's body through the needle, instantly healing his injuries. The captain's condition improved at a speed visible to the naked eye, and he let out a satisfied cry. "Is this the special life potion made by Her Excellency Aurora? It's really good stuff." Aurora would occasionally use her Esper ability to produce life potions, but there was a limit to the amount that could be produced. Thus, not every Black Star soldier would be equipped with a life potion. Most people would only use normal healing potions, but with Nero's wealth, he would naturally be equipped with Aurora's potion. "Those who are heavily injured, come over. I still have some potions, and I will help you recover," Nero said loudly. Someone could not help but speak up. "Leave some for yourself. There will be a bloody battle later. What if you get injured?" "It's fine. I still have other potions." Nero did not mind. Everyone looked at each other and shrugged. It was not bad to have a tycoon in their team. It would be a waste not to hug his thigh. Nero healed his teammates one by one, and during this process, they were discussing their battle strategy. The captain's tone was solemn. "Everyone, the current situation is extremely disadvantageous for us. We have fallen into a trap, and our entire fleet has been ambushed by the enemy. The others can't even take care of themselves, so they won't be able to provide support for us. We are already isolated, and we can only rely on ourselves to break out. There are 3 Kundi race battleships above us, and we don't have any transport vehicles. It's extremely dangerous. If the enemy continued to bombard us with their fleet, we would be in a dire situation." However, the enemy stopped their attacks and sent their ground troops to approach us. The vice-captain's eyes flashed. "This means that the enemy has the intention of capturing us alive. This might be our only chance to escape." "That's right." The captain nodded. "If we want to escape, we have to obtain control of the air. The fleet won't be able to provide support for us, and we can only snatch a spaceship ourselves. The chances are slim, but there is at least some hope. These ruins are our barrier, and if we rush out, the enemy will be able to bombard us without fear. We can only wait for the enemy soldiers to enter the underground base before exchanging fire with us. In order to prevent accidental casualties, the enemy will not fire casually. Thus, we have to split into 2 teams. One team will deal with the enemy soldiers in these ruins, while the other team will snatch the spaceship. As he said that, the captain paused, and everyone looked at each other. This was an important mission that concerned their lives, and they might only have one chance. It was extremely dangerous, and there was only a slim chance of survival. Thus, the question was, who should be the one to snatch the spaceship? Logically speaking, the strongest person should be the one to carry out this mission. The strongest person in the team was Nero, who had a strong background. To ask a young man with a strong background to take on such a dangerous mission, everyone was hesitant. Upon seeing that, Nero also realized it. He gritted his teeth and made up his mind. I'll go. There's no one more suitable than me here. The captain glanced at him, and did not try to shirk away. He nodded slowly and said in a serious tone, "Okay, we'll rely on you. We'll deal with the enemy and buy you time. Remember, all of our lives are in your hands." "I understand." Nero took a deep breath and calmed himself down. He operated his mecha and entered high stealth mode. He looked at everyone deeply before leaving and disappearing into the darkness. The captain sighed and looked at everyone sternly. "I don't think I need to emphasize what we should do. No matter what, we must drag the enemy here. We understand." The vice-captain nodded with a complicated expression. Other than Nero, everyone knew what the captain was saying. In reality, there were two sets of battle plans. They would drag the enemy here while Nero snatched the spaceship. This was only the first plan. When this plan failed, they would unhesitatingly carry out their hidden backup plan, which was to change from delaying to fighting to the death, allowing the clueless Nero to abandon them and escape by himself. This was not only because of Nero's relationship with their army commander, but also because they knew that this young man's future would far exceed their imagination. Only by letting a young man with such great potential escape would they be able to take revenge for them. After moving in the darkness for a while, the battle between his teammates and the Kundi race soldiers finally broke out in the communication channel. At this moment, Nero was no longer on the battlefield. He had come to the entrance of a collapsed tunnel that led to the ground. He concealed himself and locked onto the nearest spaceship with his radar. Nero's palms were filled with sweat as he carefully released a unique hovering guard. It was black and gold in color, and its texture was completely different from all of Nero's other equipment. It gave off an incomparably high-quality feeling, and after being released, it circled around Nero's head. "I'll be relying on you, brother." Nero touched the hovering guard and calmed down. "Don't worry, kid. With your big brother here, no one will be able to hurt you," the hovering guard suddenly said. This was Nero's final trump card. This hovering guard was a gift that Han Shao had given him when they first met. It was a high-grade orange machine that was created by a beyond-grade A super. It was powered by dark energy and was enhanced with Emperor's Gift and Machinery Fusion, Give. After Han Shao had obtained the mechanical life tinder, he had modified it into a mechanical life form that possessed its own consciousness and the ability to grow. When Nero was young, even without the enhancement of mechanical force, the Heavenly Guardian could deal with a Grade C super. Now that Nero had become a Grade C+ super and possessed perfect mechanical sense, the power that the Heavenly Guardian could unleash was not weak even among Grade B supers. Most of the time, Nero would not use this trump card, especially when sparring in the academy. Even if the pugilist he was sparring with suddenly appeared in front of him and beat him black and blue, he had never used this trump card. Even Mia, who was the closest to him, did not know about his true strength. In the academy, Mia had sparred with him countless times, but in truth, she had never known how strong he was when he went all out. Looking at the target marked on the radar, Nero took a deep breath and adjusted his state of mind, allowing the energy in his body to boil. "Phew, I can do it!" After calming himself down, Nero no longer hesitated and activated the thrusters. Boom! His entire body suddenly shot up into the air. With a loud bang, he smashed through the rocks at the entrance of the cave and soared into the sky. The 3 battleships in the sky immediately fired their cannons at Nero. The power of the cannons was lethal to a grade C super. However, the next moment, the heavenly guardian following Nero trembled slightly and formed a golden shield that protected Nero. Bang! 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 All the cannons on the ships fired, exploding into bursts of light that resembled fireworks. However, only a slight crack appeared on the shield, and it was still repairing itself, forcefully enduring a round of concentrated fire. At the same time, the few Kundi race battleships in the sky also understood Nero's intentions and immediately activated their shields to prevent outsiders from boarding. "Create a passage for me." With a thought from Nero, the Sky Guardian flashed with a flash of mechanical force and quickly changed its shape, revealing a hexagonal cannon in the middle. Dense dark energy burst out, and a series of extremely penetrative dark energy beams shot out. Whoosh! The rate of fire was simply too fast, and it felt as though someone had to pee frequently. A hole appeared in the shield of the target battleship, and Nero took the opportunity to charge into the hole. Pop, 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 pop. A few compressed orbs were shot out by him, and they turned into a laser drill that stuck to the battleship and rapidly cut open the outer armor of the battleship, creating a hole that led to the interior of the battleship. Nero rolled and crashed into the battleship. Without a second word, he threw out a bunch of mechanical soldiers and started to slaughter the battleship. A large number of spaceships fell under his cannon fire. Because this battleship had sent a portion of its soldiers to deal with the other members of Nero's team, there were not enough soldiers in the battleship. Nero, who was going all out, did not take long to charge into the main control room. He took out the Army's standard intrusion chip and inserted it into the artificial intelligence core of the battleship. He was not a virtual mechanic, but the Army had an automatic intrusion device. Right at this moment, Nero suddenly staggered and realized that the battleship was shaking violently. Rumble! Looking out through the porthole, he saw that the other 2 battleships had turned around and were focusing their fire on the battleship that he had boarded. They actually attacked the spaceship of their teammates. How ruthless! Nero was speechless. However, his actions were not slow. He charged into the command room and successfully took over the control of the battleship. He injected the majority of his energy into the battleship's shield and controlled the battleship to slam into the nearest enemy battleship. Bang! The collision between the shields of the 2 battleships caused large amounts of sparks to fly. The enemy's battleship lost its balance and flew to the side. Coincidentally, this battleship was flying toward the other enemy battleship. As the 2 battleships collided, they lost control of the battleship at the same time. Making use of this opportunity, Nero piloted the battleship and used the body of the battleship to stand between the 2 enemy battleships and the ground troop. "Come out quickly! I have snatched the battleship. Charge to the ground from the coordinates I have set. I will use the tractor beam to pull you guys up." Nero immediately shouted in the channel. "Beautiful!" The captain and the others were overjoyed. With their powerful individual strength, they forcefully broke through the encirclement of the Kundi race soldiers. Bang! The next moment, a certain piece of ground in the ruins exploded, and the members of the squad charged to the surface. The Kundi race soldiers were still chasing after them. "Captain, don't stop!" Nero's face lit up with joy, and he hurriedly shouted. At this moment, they were in a race against time, and Nero did not have the time to care about the 2 enemy battleships behind him. He immediately used the tractor beam to attract the members of the squad. At the same time, he released a large number of cannons to provide cover fire for the Kundi race soldiers chasing after them. The tractor beam successfully sucked all of his teammates into the battleship. This unforeseen event had also attracted the attention of the enemy battleships in the city. More battleships were rushing over, and their numbers far exceeded theirs. Nero did not dare to continue fighting. After saving the squad, He immediately charged into the sky and escaped into space. Very quickly, the other members of the squad arrived at the command room and pounced forward to rub Nero's head. "Brat, well done. Haha, we are saved. I thought that we were going to die this time. It actually went so smoothly. It seems like luck is on our side." Everyone had a look of joy on their faces, and they were not stingy with their praises for Nero. Nero was also rather excited. "Don't be so happy so early. We are not out of danger yet." Although the captain said that, he still had a smile on his face. Although there was still a large number of battleships chasing after them, the situation was much better than before. After being happy for a while, everyone thought about their other teammates who were in danger and retracted their smiles. "We managed to escape, but what about the other members?" someone asked. "There's no choice. We won't be able to help. There are too many enemies, and if we rush over to help, we will only be implicated as well." The captain shook his head. He was extremely clear about the current situation. If they were to rely on just one ship, they would only be sending themselves to their deaths. What they should do now was to split up and escape instead of fighting. Furthermore, their current situation was not as good as the others, and they could only rely on their own luck. Right at this moment, Nero suddenly thought of something, and his heart skipped a beat. "Right, I wonder how Mia's team is doing." The moment he thought of that, Nero could no longer sit still. He handed the spaceship over to his teammates and hurriedly took out his communicator to contact Mia. The process of waiting for the call to be picked up was torture, and time seemed to drag on for a long time. Nero waited anxiously for a while, but the call did not go through. He could only call Mia's teammates one by one, but no one picked up. He became more and more nervous. It was only when he contacted the captain of Mia's team that the call finally went through. However, the sounds of battle coming from the other side made Nero's heart sink to the bottom. Cough cough. "Nero? You guys escaped?" "It's me. You guys were attacked too? What's the situation?" "We have a spaceship that can provide support." Nero's tone was urgent as he fired off a barrage of questions. Don't come over. You guys should quickly run. My team has been captured, and Mia has been captured alive. I'm the only one left who is still resisting, and I won't be able to hold on for much longer. The enemy has a few battleships, and you guys won't be able to save me." Cough cough. After the other party finished speaking, the call ended abruptly. Nero's face twitched and he turned to leave with large strides towards the cabin door. The surrounding teammates had also heard the call, and upon seeing Nero's actions, a group of people hurriedly rushed over and held him down. "Nero, don't take things too hard," the captain shouted. "I have to go save her." Nero was held down by 7 to 8 burly men, and he struggled with a resolute expression. "Don't be silly. Didn't I tell you just now that it's useless for us to go save her?" the captain roared. "I know, and that's why I didn't intend to ask you guys for help." Nero gritted his teeth and said, "This is my own choice, and I didn't ask you guys to take the risk. You guys can pilot this spaceship and leave. I will go save her alone. Don't stop me. You won't have a chance if you go alone. You'll just be sending yourself to your death. Don't be rash." The captain held Nero down tightly. Nero struggled for a while before gradually calming down. He sat on the ground and covered his face with both hands, not saying a word. Seeing this, everyone released their hands and took a few steps back, leaving him alone. Sensing Nero's sorrow, the captain could not help but sigh. He squatted down and patted Nero's shoulder. After pondering for a while, he could not think of a way to console him and could only mutter, "She was only captured and she's not dead yet. Perhaps there's still a chance. Let's think of a way to save her in the future. Right now we can only escape." The moment he said that, Nero suddenly raised his head with reddened eyes. "You're right. I was too rash just now. Thank you for stopping me. I can't let Mia and the rest fall into the hands of the enemy. I don't know how they will be tortured. I still have a final hope. As he spoke, Nero stood up and took out his communicator. Taking a deep breath, he mustered his courage and dialed Han Zhao's number. He had originally decided not to contact Han Xiao during his military service because he did not want to disappoint his godfather. If not for the fact that he had no other choice, he would not want to trouble Han Xiao. The signal rang 3 times, and to Nero, it felt like a year had passed. After 3 precise rings, the call was picked up, and a familiar calm voice came through. "Nero, what's the matter?" Han Xiao had a subtle smile on his face. "Godfather, I'm sorry to disappoint you." Nero rubbed his eyes and said softly, "I've encountered a predicament that I can't resolve. I hope that you can help me." "Speak," Han Xiao replied indifferently. Nero quickly explained the situation and lowered his head, waiting for a reply. Looking at his appearance, Han Xiao stroked his chin and smiled. "I refuse." Nero raised his head with a look of shock. "Are you very surprised?" Han Xiao kept his smile. "Your identity is different now. Not only are you my godson, but you're also an ordinary soldier. I have indeed given you excellent treatment, but that does not mean that I will always give you special treatment." But, Nero's eyes turned red. "It's not impossible for me to help you. Putting aside our relationship, just from a business perspective, what can you give me to hire me to help you?" Han Xiao said indifferently. I don't know." "Then why do you need my help?" Han Xiao blinked his eyes. "Our relationship is not fake, but I will not help you for no reason. The rules are like that. If you want something, you have to exchange it with something else. Without this layer of identity, what do you have left?" Nero's mind was in a mess as he muttered, I don't." Seeing Nero cover his head with his hands and not speak for a long time, Han Xiao relaxed and smiled. "Why, do you feel despair? Think about it, how long has it been since you thanked me?" When Nero heard this, his body trembled as he lowered his head and muttered, I'm sorry. I beg you, I'm asking you, do you feel despair?" Han Xiao narrowed his eyes and spoke with a heavier tone. Nero remained silent for a long time before raising his head again. He had already bitten his lips, and his eyes were hazy with tears as he nodded at Han Xiao. "That's right. Remember this feeling and don't ever experience it again." Han Xiao sat up straight and chuckled. "Don't worry. This time, I promise you that I will help you save your little girlfriend." Nero's emotions fluctuated like a roller coaster. First, he fell from the clouds into the abyss, and then he soared into the sky from the abyss. At this moment, he was stunned for a moment before he regained his senses. He held onto the communicator with both hands and was about to cry tears of joy. Thank you, don't be happy so early. This isn't free." Han Xiao supported his face with his palms and patiently said, "You don't know what you have to offer, but in reality, you aren't completely useless. At the very least, you have a strong mechanical talent. Why don't you use this as a bargaining chip?" "What do you mean?" Nero did not understand. "If you really want to explain, you can understand that I don't want you to waste your talent. There's no need to ask what I mean. You only need to answer me. Do you agree or reject?" Han Xiao smiled. Nero still did not understand, but he had no choice. He gritted his teeth and nodded heavily. "I agree. I beg you to help me. You have triggered the special character mission, Nero's request. Mission introduction. Nero has agreed to your deal and is willing to use his talent and ability in exchange for your help. Mission requirements: save Mia Morato. Reward: choose one of Nero's abilities or talents." Chapter 977. It really did appear. It's actually a specific learning type mission. I thought it would be a random ability draw. Looking at the content of this mission, Han Zhao's eyes flashed with joy. This type of mission was similar to employment. In his previous life, when players accepted missions from NPCs, they could negotiate with the NPCs about the mission rewards, such as the amount of money, the ability to learn, items, and so on. There was a life profession called lobbyist, which had a series of skills and talents. Its use was to increase the success rate of communicating with NPCs. Its effect was similar to a player's reputation. However, the probability of a specific learning type mission was extremely low, and it depended on luck. Most of the time, the reward would be a random ability draw. Han Xiao was only trying to influence the reward based on the experience of the players in his previous life. He did not have 100% confidence that he would be able to obtain an ability draw type mission. In his original plan, he thought that it would at most be a random ability draw mission. He did not expect there to be such a surprise. If that's the case, there's no need to rely on luck. Han Xiao heaved a sigh of relief. He had thought that the reward would at most be a random ability draw, and he was worried that he would not be able to obtain the perfect mechanical sense in 1 or 2 tries. Thus, he had prepared many scenarios for Nero. However, with a specific type of mission, there was no need to torture Nero anymore. At this moment, Han Xiao suddenly had a guess, and his expression became strange. Could it be that I got this mission because of Nero's advanced luck glow? If I get it in one go, I won't continue to scam him, so Nero won't have to go through the crueler scenarios? This does not seem impossible. So terrifying, Han Xiao's mouth twitched, and he did not know what expression to make. Actually, this time, it had deviated slightly from Han Xiao's original plan. Originally, Han Xiao wanted Nero to call him for help after falling into a desperate situation. However, he did not expect this kid to be so good at fighting and had the protection of the protagonist's aura. He had forcefully opened a path of blood and escaped by himself, almost ruining Han Xiao's plan. If it wasn't for the fact that he had come up with a fake signal to trick this brat's little lover, Nero might not have come to him for help. If that was the case, everything would have been for nothing. All sorts of thoughts flashed through his mind before Han Xiao regained his senses. When he saw that Nero was still anxiously waiting online, he couldn't help but smile. All right, since the agreement is made, leave everything to me. Nodding his head, Nero wiped his tears and couldn't help asking, Godfather, when can you come over? I'm afraid that Mia will. He did not know that Han Xiao's mechanical army was hidden in the fleet, so he thought that when Han Xiao said he would help, he would have to save Mia after the mission was over. Who knew how many days it would take, so he was worried that Mia would be tortured by the enemy during this time. Hearing this, Han Xiao held back his laughter, gave him a meaningful look and said, Don't worry, it won't be long. With that, he hung up the call without explaining anything to Nero. Exhaling, Han Xiaoxin was delighted. He switched back to the perspective of the Lord's avatar on the battlefield and nodded. You can start now. Where is this place? Mia's mind was in a mess, and her eyelids were extremely heavy. She struggled to open her eyes halfway, and the scene before her appeared before her eyes. 5 meters in front of her was a transparent glass window made of nanomaterials, and a few Kundi race soldiers were standing behind it. They were looking at her and whispering to each other, as though they were saying something. However, the window blocked out all sound, so she couldn't hear anything. Her entire body was exhausted, and she couldn't control her body. It was as though a ghost was pressing down on her, and it was extremely difficult for her to even move a finger. It was as though her body had been injected with some sort of extremely powerful sedative. She could clearly feel that her body was fixed to a certain device, and she couldn't move her limbs. What happened to me? Why am I here? Mia racked her brains and tried to recall what had happened before she lost consciousness. Her brain felt as though it was filled with lead, and the speed of her thoughts was extremely slow. Fragmented memories slowly appeared in her mind, and she pondered for a full 10 seconds before she recalled everything that had happened. She had followed her team to the wilderness to check for abnormal signals, and they had encountered a few enemy battleships that had suddenly appeared in the wilderness. The entire team had been caught off guard, and she had also been hit by a few of the battleship's cannons. She had been severely injured and had fallen to the ground, losing her ability to fight. Her brain had been impacted, and the last thing she saw before she completely lost consciousness was the Kundi race soldiers approaching and squatting down in front of her. Does this mean that I was captured by the enemy? Where are the others? Mia was shocked and wanted to turn her head. However, her head was also fixed, and she could only try her best to move her eyes. She looked to the side from the corner of her eyes and realized that there was a row of fixed devices beside her. All her teammates had been restrained, and most of them were still unconscious. Right at this moment, a weak and familiar voice sounded from the other side. "Mia, you're awake?" Mia hurriedly looked over and realized that it was the captain of her team. "Captain, you were also captured?" "I was unable to fight against the battleships, but the enemy did not kill us. They captured all of us alive. It's good that everyone is not dead." Mia heaved a sigh of relief. The captain laughed bitterly. "You're wrong. Instead of falling into the hands of this group of enemies, it might be better to die." "Why?" Mia was a little dizzy and subconsciously asked. "Think about it. Why would the enemy want to capture us alive? If I'm not wrong, they are most likely treating us as research materials. What awaits us in the future will be all sorts of inhumane dissection and experiment. Every inch of our flesh and blood will become experimental materials for the enemy. Compared to this pain, death is nothing." The captain's tone was filled with despair. "The others can't even take care of themselves, and no one can save us." Hearing that, Mia felt a chill run down her spine. Although she was a super, she was only a teenager. How could she have experienced such despair? At this moment, Nero's figure involuntarily appeared in her mind. Her heart couldn't help but ache, and her expression became miserable. "I'm sorry. I might have to go back on my words. I won't be able to walk down this path with you." Tears welled up in Mia's eyes. Her eyelids drooped as tears streaked down her beautiful face, leaving 2 trails behind. At this moment, the door opened and a few Kundi race soldiers walked in. They took out syringes from the cupboard and walked toward the 2 of them who had woken up. Although the other party did not say anything, Mia could tell from their actions that the enemy was trying to anesthetize them and prevent them from regaining consciousness. Mia wanted to fight to the death, but all the cells in her body had fallen silent, and she was unable to use any strength. She could only watch as the Kundi race soldiers approached her, and her eyes were filled with despair. Boom! Right at this moment, a strong tremor ran through the entire spaceship, and the few Kundi race soldiers almost fell. Before Mia could recover from her shock, her vision blurred. The few Kundi race soldiers that were still alive a second ago suddenly turned into a few corpses that were smashed into the wall. A mechanical soldier appeared in front of her as though it had teleported. However, its speed was too fast, and she was unable to see it clearly with her current strength. Crack, crack, crack. The next moment, this mechanical soldier crushed the device that was imprisoning Mia and the others, took out the Aurora potion, and quickly injected everyone with it. Everyone's spirits were lifted, and they all recovered to their peak state. They groped their bodies, and their faces revealed the ecstasy of surviving a calamity. Everyone turned to the mechanical soldier with surprise and doubt in their eyes. They did not expect that someone would come to save them in such a desperate situation. Mia's emotions fluctuated greatly, and she only recovered after a few seconds. She stared at the mechanical soldier and could not help but ask, "Who are you? Are you also from the army? Why, don't you recognize me?" The mechanical soldier let out a laughter similar to Han Zhao's. "I am Black Star." Everyone's eyes suddenly widened, their faces filled with astonishment. It was the army commander who came to save us? Why would he appear here? Mia's mouth opened wide, and she suddenly realized that she had guessed the truth. For someone of Black Star's level to appear here, there could only be one explanation. He had actually been secretly protecting Nero. The others also reacted and rejoiced at the fact that they had survived a calamity. Fortunately, they were assigned to the same unit as Nero. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for such a turn of events to occur. At the very least, half of their lives were saved by Nero. All right, my mechanical army has taken over the battlefield. Follow me. The mechanical soldier controlled by Han Xiao waved his hand and calmed everyone down. After thinking for a while, he patted Mia's shoulder and slowly said, "Bring Nero to me. After the war, get Nero to bring you to me. I will introduce you to a few calamity-grade pugilists, and get them to accept you as a student." Mia's eyes widened in disbelief. She was stunned for a while before realizing that Han Xiao had given her the opportunity to become a disciple of a calamity-grade super. She was both excited and flattered, not daring to imagine that she would be treated differently by Black Star. She hurriedly nodded like a chick pecking at rice. "All right, thank you so much, Your Excellency Black Star. It's nothing. I just feel that you have the potential to become a calamity-grade super." Han Xiao smiled and turned to look at the other members of his team. After pondering for a second, he said, "As for you guys, you can report to Herluz when you return. I will get him to increase your authority in the army. You can be promoted, form new teams, or choose new positions. You will not be short of material rewards." They did not expect that being captured would bring them such benefits. Everyone looked at each other with joy in their eyes. Outside the floating base, the mechanical army that had been waiting all along suddenly bared its fangs. Under the suppression of his strength, the entire base did not have any room to resist and was instantly infiltrated. All of their military forces were disintegrated, and the entire base fell into Han Zhao's control. Be it the Kundi race soldiers or officers, they all fell from heaven into the abyss and became captive. On the battlefield, the invisible mechanical army finally appeared and joined the battle. Under the shocked gazes of the army warriors, they destroyed all of the enemy's battleships. Nero and the others were still escaping when a mechanical army suddenly appeared in front of them and opened fire behind them. They hurriedly looked back and saw a beam of light shooting past their spaceship, easily piercing through the few Kundi race battleships behind them. Boom! 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 Flames lit up, and all of the spaceships that were chasing them exploded from the inside out, turning into fireworks in the sky. Seeing this, Nero was stunned. How did he arrive so quickly? Speaking of Godfather, it had only been 1 or 2 minutes since the call for help. At this moment, he suddenly thought of the meaningful look Han Xiao had given him when he hung up the call and came to a realization. Although Godfather wants me to train alone, he has always sent troops to protect me in secret. These mechanical troops are most likely hidden within the troops and will come to my aid at the most critical moment. So, the call earlier was just to educate me? Godfather, he has a sharp tongue but a soft heart. Realizing Han Zhao's good intentions, Nero was touched and wiped away the tears in his eyes. He secretly evaluated Han Zhao's character. It was the complete opposite of Han Technician's true character. Even Nero's thoughts had been predicted by Han Xiao, and everything was going according to the script that the great director Han had written. The entire battlefield was under the control of Han Zhao's mechanical army, and this small fleet of the Kundi race would not be able to do anything. Han Zhao's mechanical army swiftly ended the battle and gathered all the army warriors before sending Mia and the others back. Seeing that Mia was safe, Nero's tense nerves finally relaxed, and he let out a long breath before revealing a comforting smile. "That's great. You're fine." Mia immediately saw Nero and ran to him. She originally wanted to give him a hug, but seeing that there were so many people around, she felt a little embarrassed. She only raised her fist and lightly punched Nero's chest before softly saying, "Thank you. If not for you, I wouldn't have been able to return. Nero smiled and said, I said that I would protect you. Looking at his silly smile, Mia could not help but want to argue with him. It was clearly His Excellency Black Star who protected me. Cough cough. Han Xiao coughed and interrupted their conversation. I've saved you. You have to be more careful in the future. Your luck won't be so good every time, and I won't always be protecting you. I understand. Nero turned around and thanked Han Xiao solemnly. Thank you. I will remember today's lesson and not act rashly in the future. I promise you that I won't waste my talent. Han Xiao nodded with a smile. He then turned to look at the other army warriors present, nodded slightly, and slowly said, Although I interfered in the battle, I won't steal your credit for capturing so many Kundi race captives. Send these captives back and look for Haluz afterward. He will arrange additional rewards for all of you. This time, in order to allow Nero to undergo his tribulation, Han Xiao had also made use of this group of army warriors. Han Xiao had long prepared compensation for this, and he would not be stingy in this aspect. When he made use of the other party, if the other party was one of his own, Han Xiao would definitely give them a reward. From Bennett to Godora, to the Amethyst Civilization, to the Red Empire, he had always been like this, and he had never changed. The invisible mechanical army had been monitoring the battle the entire time. A battle that was not dangerous had been exchanged for a promotion and an opportunity to become an officer. This was not a bad deal, and Han Xiao was the one who had profited the most. After a few words of consolation, Han Xiao was no longer interested in watching Nero and Mia flirt. He immediately retracted his consciousness and switched his vision back to his main body. It's finally done. Nero's request has been completed. You have received the reward. Choose one of Nero's abilities, ability/talent. Please choose one from the following as your reward. A list of abilities popped up on the interface, and all of Nero's abilities and talents were listed. Han Xiao was extremely clear about Nero's abilities. Among all the abilities, there were two that had the highest priority. One was Perfect Mechanical Sense, and the other was Advanced Luck Glow. There was only one ability that could be chosen. Between these two abilities, Han Xiao needed Perfect Mechanical Sense the most. This was one of the top molding talents of the mechanic class, and almost every beyond grade A mechanic had it. As for an Advanced Luck Glow, he did want it, but his priority was slightly lower. After all, this ability would not help with his combat strength, and it would also weaken his Together with You to the Underworld ability. Furthermore, his basic luck attribute was slightly low, so the effect of this ability was limited. He was also afraid that if his luck increased, it would be harder for him to obtain a mission completion card. Furthermore, with Ding Kukuku, Han Xiao did not need luck that much. Perfect Mechanical Sense was the goal of his plan, and Han Xiao was very satisfied with his efficiency. In order to reward Nero, he decided not to let Nero suffer for the time being. As for Advanced Luck Glow, he would find a chance to give it to Nero in the future. Han Xiao stroked his chin. Putting away his devilish thoughts, Han Xiao calmed himself down and selected a target on the interface. The next moment, an intense mechanical force current flowed out from his brain. Selection complete. Your talent, Basic Mechanical Sense, has disappeared. You have received Perfect Mechanical Sense. Chapter 978. On the divine mechanical throne, crackling sounds could be heard, and thick arcs of mechanical force shot out like whips, leaving charred marks on the ground. His brain felt a slight tingling pain, as though he was being electrocuted. With his eyes shining brightly, Han Xiao could clearly feel that the cells in his body were operating at full power, continuously spitting out energy. After a few minutes, this symptom finally subsided, and the world in his eyes changed slightly. He now had a clearer mechanical perception, and his vision was deeper into the microscopic structure. How magical! Han Xiao narrowed his eyes and felt this change. Using the character summon card, and having this talent felt completely different. The current, perfect mechanical sense was the reason why his body had changed. His basic attributes did not change, but his mechanical force was strengthened, as well as his perception of machinery. In his senses, machinery became more familiar and intimate. The core effect of perfect mechanical sense was the total machinery affinity of 1.4x. According to Han Zhao's attributes, it increased his machinery affinity by around 2,000 to 3,000, which was a huge leap. There were two secondary effects. First, when he used mechanical force, his machinery grade would increase by 1 to 2 grades, with the highest grade not exceeding pink. Currently, Han Zhao's equipment was basically all orange equipment, so this bonus was no longer of much use to the current Han Xiao. The other effect was more important. It increased the level of all mechanic skills by 4, which could break through the upper limit. At the very least, he had gained a few more slots for apostle weapons. The mechanical sense talent was a personal talent, and the difficulty of learning it in the later stages varied from person to person. Some geniuses could easily learn it, but some would not be able to learn it even if they were extremely strong. Han Zhao's elementary grade mechanical sense was obtained from a mission, so the chances of him upgrading it to perfect mechanical sense were basically zero. Generally speaking, this kind of talent was either passively awakened or actively cultivated from a young age. It would become a habit when one was at their most malleable age. As the saying went, one's name would spread far and wide in the future. Young age was the best time to cultivate one's talent, and as one grew older and stronger, the difficulty of learning talents would increase accordingly. I've finally obtained perfect mechanical sense. My normal combat strength is finally on par with when I use the character summon card. Han Xiaoxin was very satisfied. He had been looking forward to this ability for a long time. Now, I'm finally not embarrassed, ahahaha. Only strength that belonged to oneself was the most reassuring. Turning the explosive trump card into a normal combat strength greatly increased his stability. Now, he could be considered to have completely secured the qualifications to be a peak beyond grade A mechanic, and the gap between him and the Mecha Empire had also been greatly reduced. However, it was still too early for him to wrestle with Manison. Manison still had perfect mechanical sense, and this was only a small gap. Han Xiao was not in a hurry. Although he was also a peak beyond grade A, he was different from everyone else. He still had plenty of room for growth. Before the next major upgrade, Han Xiao did not want to have any new disputes with Manison. While Manison felt that he had consolidated his position and could not be shaken, he secretly developed to prevent the other party from seeing through the speed of his improvement and adjusting his strategy to deal with him. Although Han Xiao was not afraid of Manison doing anything to him, before he completed the foundation of the flickering world, he did not want to create more problems. After all, Manison had the protection of the Radiant Federation. Furthermore, he was a cunning rabbit with many burrows, so he could not do anything to the other party. However, although perfect mechanical sense has become my normal combat strength, it does not mean that I've lost this trump card. Han Xiaoxin's heart skipped a beat. The character summon card had nothing to do with one's abilities. For example, a character summon card that could increase one's state would be affected even if the character was in the same state. In other words, the perfect mechanical sense character summon card was still useful to him. Now that he had perfect mechanical sense, he would have the chance to double his strength. With the two of them stacked together, how terrifying would that be? This should be the only double perfect mechanical sense in the universe. This is probably a little too awesome. Han Xiao mumbled to himself. Just thinking about it made him feel scared. If he used it in front of Manison, the other party's worldview would probably be shattered. Thus, it's best to leave the blank character summon card to Reynold or Nero. Whether I get it or not will depend on my luck. Han Xiao experienced the perfect mechanical sense for a while before closing the talent introduction. Returning to the skill list, he pulled down the blueprint tab and looked at a new blueprint that he had recently obtained. Spacetime Splitter uses a special spacetime technology to open up a new branch that exists temporarily outside of the main timeline. Designates and completes a preset action plan to form a timeline that has a beginning and an end. It breaks through the continuity of spacetime and performs a time jump to reduce the process. Can be used on any object. This device has an irreversible negative effect. Objects that are cut by spacetime will be corrected by the main timeline. Once completely corrected, the object will be annihilated along with the branch timeline. If the timeline is completed smoothly, the object will also be annihilated and disappear. After Han Xiao stole the spacetime splitter technology from the Kundi race, he learned it once and spent some experience to deduce this technology. In the end, he obtained this new blueprint and spent some time to create a finished product. Standing up and walking down from his throne, Han Xiao went to the warehouse beside him and took out a rectangular device that was more than 10 meters tall and 4 to 5 meters wide. This was the finished product of the spacetime splitter, and it looked like a 3-story building. Over the past few days, he had done some simple tests on the spacetime splitter, and it operated normally. It was just that the activation time was a little long. Furthermore, it did not work out of thin air. He had to connect the spacetime splitter to the target in advance before it would work. Of course, Han Xiao would not use such a dangerous device on himself. However, after thinking about it for the past few days, this thing seemed to be of great help to mechanic. The most suitable target to use the spacetime splitter was the mass-produced mechanical army. He did not feel the pinch of consuming mechanical soldiers at all. With this additional function, he could perform some tactical missions that he could not do in the past. His combat ability would have a qualitative improvement, which was equivalent to exchanging his endurance for a few levels of tactical assault ability. To a mechanic with an army, this was naturally very worth it. Secondly, it could also be used as a new strategic killing weapon. Compared to portable psionic bombs and biochemical weapons, the spacetime splitter was much more stealthy and difficult to detect. It was more suitable for assassination and destruction. Han Xiao stroked his chin and pondered. However, I should use it as little as possible. In the future, when the dynasty realizes the power of the spacetime splitter, they will start to hide and monopolize this technology. Although with my status, the dynasty will not force me to take back the technology in my hands, they will definitely ask me to keep it a secret. There was no need to hide the fact that he had the spacetime splitter technology from the dynasty. He had only stolen a copy before the dynasty monopolized it. He did not plan to hide it, and there was no need to. If the Empire knew that he also had this technology, it could also raise his status. After all, he had stolen the chicken before the Empire paid attention to him. It was legal and not something that could not be exposed, so there was no need to hide it. Moreover, if he used this technology on others in the future, it would be exposed sooner or later. Perhaps the Empire would help him hide it. In any case, no matter what, he would not spit out the fat meat that he had eaten. Shaking his head, Han Xiao put away these thoughts. He took out a spacetime amber, hung it in midair, and connected it to the external port of the spacetime splitter. Today, he was going to test if the spacetime amber could be affected by the spacetime splitter. This was his first time doing this experiment. The operation of the spacetime splitter was a little complicated. Han Xiao fiddled with it for a while before activating it. Buzz buzz buzz. The entire device vibrated immediately. Streams of colorful light flowed through the pipes and into the spacetime amber. He took a few steps back and waited silently for a while. Only then did the vibrations of the device gradually stop. The splitter is complete, Han Zhao's eyes flashed. He cut off the nanoparticles that were hanging the spacetime amber. The spacetime amber fell smoothly. It did not skip frames according to the preset program. Narrowing his eyes, he picked up the spacetime amber and played with it in his hand for a while. He confirmed that there were no changes at all. Looks like the spacetime amber is immune to the spacetime splitter. After coming to this conclusion, Han Xiao breathed a sigh of relief. This was good news for him. The fact that the spacetime splitter could not solve this space wonder meant that the spacetime amber was still an unsolvable method. Even if the dynasty or more organizations obtained this technology, the spacetime amber in his hands would still be irreplaceable. After thinking about it, Han Xiao conducted a new experiment. He used the spacetime splitter on a normal machine and then wrapped it in the spacetime amber to see if the side effects of the spacetime splitter would still take effect. The principle of the spacetime amber seemed to be a solidified special spacetime. The machine wrapped in it did not suffer the side effects of the spacetime splitter. It seemed to ignore the correction ability of the timeline. However, at the same time, the normal effects of the spacetime splitter would not take effect. After unwrapping the spacetime amber, the machine was corrected by the main timeline and self-destructed. It released a huge amount of energy and almost blew up the warehouse. In this case, the spacetime amber can only temporarily freeze the object and help it dry out. It can't cancel out the side effects of the spacetime splitter. So, it can only be used as a coffin? That's the same meaning as the amber. Han Xiao brushed the dust off his body and fell into deep thought. Maybe there are other methods. For example, I can set up the spacetime splitter in advance and seal it. Then, I can use the amber's attack immunity ability to send it to the target location using the normal method. Then, I can unlock the amber and activate the spacetime splitter effect. This is equivalent to a delayed detonation. Thinking about it, Han Xiao instinctively felt that this was an application with great potential. He still needed time to explore more possibilities. After testing it a few more times to ensure that there were no mistakes, he put away the spacetime splitter. After thinking about it, he took out his communicator and contacted the dynasty's exploration army commander, Terakov. After the call connected, Terakov's face appeared on the screen. The background was the strategy conference room, and it seemed like a meeting was in progress. Black Star, what's the matter? You're in a meeting? I'll call you back later. It's just a routine meeting. It's not as important as you. Just say what you want to say. Han Xiao smiled. The enemy's movements have been a little strange recently. You've noticed it too, right? The enemy seems to be luring us deeper. Do you have any information on this? More or less. I sent out troops a while ago and destroyed the enemy's database. I discovered that the enemy is using a scorched earth tactic. They want to use the primordial psionic energy to devour these few star systems and cause damage to the dynasty's fleet. I have the coordinates of the psionic energy planted by the enemy as well as the movements of their entire fleet. Well done. Terakov's eyes sparkled, and he felt gratified. The other beyond grade, as did not have much interest in this war. Firstly, as experts, they were not interested in bullying a native civilization that did not have a super system. Secondly, they were afraid that the enemy would randomly throw out the primordial psionic energy and embarrass themselves. Thus, they only sent their subordinates to respond to the call. Black Star was the only beyond grade A ally who personally came to help. He was indeed a talent that the dynasty valued. I'll send you the information later. Don't forget to record my contribution, Han Xiao said half-jokingly. Haha, don't worry. I'll definitely record your contribution. Terakov was in a good mood and felt that Han Xiao was more and more pleasing to the eye. Han Xiao smiled and hung up the communication. With perfect mechanical sense and the space-time splicing technology in his hands, He planned to end this war as soon as possible and resume his normal exploration work. Another reason for providing this information was to raise the evaluation of the Kundi race's war mission. Since he had already completed his other objectives, he might as well help the dynasty get rid of the enemy as soon as possible. Because he did not plan to hide the fact that he possessed the spacetime splicing technology, Han Xiao did not hold back and directly took out the information. Terekov was extremely efficient, and he immediately made arrangements after receiving Han Xiao's information. The numerous armies on the front lines all sent out their troops to the coordinates indicated in the information to destroy the enemy's scorched earth plan. In the information provided by Han Xiao, the coordinates and movements of all the Kundi race fleets were recorded. The dynasty had a clear view of the enemy's every move. The armies on the front lines no longer pushed forward slowly, but spread out and headed toward the main fleet of the Kundi race. The Kundi race still did not know that all their plans had been exposed and were under the control of the dynasty. They were still carrying out their battle plan. With Han Zhao's help, the dynasty saved a lot of effort and easily crushed the Kundi race in terms of intelligence. The scales of victory were completely tilted toward the dynasty. Chapter 979. Han Zhao's intelligence had cleared the fog of war for the dynasty. The dynasty's generals on the front lines were swift and decisive, and the flames of war engulfed the Kundi race's territory in just a month. Every army split up and attacked the Kundi race's main fleet that was on standby at different locations. The battleship formations advanced and swept through the galaxy. Under the bombardment of the dynasty's cannons, the Kundi race was caught off guard and was forced to retreat, losing a large number of their main battleships. In a certain star system, a dynasty fleet was exchanging fire with the Kundi race's main fleet. The enemy was already on the verge of defeat and was being mercilessly slaughtered. The Kundi race battleships were pierced through by the psionic cannons one after another, turning into fireworks in the universe. The enemy's main ship was already surrounded, and the cannons of countless dynasty fleets were aimed at this main ship. The moment there was any movement, they would open fire and destroy it. The reason they did not kill the enemy was because they wanted to capture the commander of the enemy's fleet alive. A small spaceship flew out from the dynasty's formation, carrying the dynasty's officer who was going to take over the main ship. The enemy's main ship removed its shield as though it was surrendering. The small spaceship successfully approached and entered the port of the enemy's main ship. The difference in size between the two was like a sesame seed and a grape. Screech! The hatch of the main ship opened, and a pale-skinned dynasty officer stepped into the enemy's main ship. It was God. The adjutants of the dynasty's officers had many responsibilities. Some were like personal secretaries, and some were involved in dangerous battles. God belonged to the latter. A large number of Kundi race soldiers surrounded them, and all of them held onto their weapons tightly, emitting intense hostility. God glanced around and ignored them. He adjusted the galactic translator by his ear and slowly spoke. "Who's the commander? Step forward." A commotion broke out among the Kundi race soldiers, and a tall mantis shrimp in uniform walked out. It was the commander of this fleet. "Invader, how do you know our language?" Both sides had always been at war and had never exchanged information. To this group of Kundi race officers, this was the first time they were interacting with an invader. They were surprised that God knew their language. "It's just some insignificant technology," God said calmly. The information Han Xiao gave to the dynasty was a complete set, and it naturally included the language. There was no need for the dynasty to decipher it, as they could directly import the language into the galactic translator and communicate with each other easily. The Kundi race commander did not pursue the matter and said with a deep voice, "Please stop killing my comrades. We have already lost." "Sure. As long as you surrender and hand over the command of the fleet to me, "We will stop attacking," God said calmly. "All right, follow me." The Kundi race commander turned around to lead the way, and the soldiers beside him opened up a path. God glanced at them, and a mocking smile appeared on his face. He then followed with large strides. The group advanced along the passageway, turning one corner after another. The atmosphere was silent the entire time, and no one spoke. After walking for a while, God suddenly chuckled and said slowly, "Don't worry. You've led us around for so long. Have you prepared your trap yet? Don't make me wait too long." As soon as he said that, the Kundi race commander at the front stopped in his tracks and turned around with shock in his eyes. Exposed? But since he had discovered it, why was he still so calm? Although he had been exposed, his decision could not be changed. The Kundi race commander's tone suddenly became ferocious. "You want me to surrender after slaughtering my troops? Dream on. Let's die together." As soon as he said that, a violent tremor came from beneath his feet. God looked down and saw that the metal deck was expanding rapidly. Numerous cracks appeared on it, and a piercing blue light could be seen from the cracks. "You placed primordial psionic energy on your ship and planned to self-destruct long ago." God was only halfway through his sentence when a loud sound wave reverberated throughout the flagship. Boom! The next moment, psionic energy gushed out and swallowed the bodies of God, the Kundi race commander, and everyone else, filling up every inch of space. At the same time, the Dynasty fleet in the outside world noticed the abnormality. The enemy flagship that was surrounded exploded from the inside out, turning into a primordial psionic energy ball that rapidly spread in all directions. The Kundi race commander was planning to drag the Dynasty fleet down with him and self-destruct. In the command ship far away, the Dynasty commander in charge of this army snorted coldly. "He's indeed planning to self-destruct. Psionic Energy Disposal Team, take action." After the order was given, a circular device appeared on the bow of the Dynasty battleships in the innermost layer of the encirclement. It vibrated slightly and produced a resonance, forming an invisible transparent cover that completely enveloped the primordial psionic energy ball. The space around it was clearly distorted. The Dynasty fleet had already made preparations to deal with the self-destruction of psionic energy. This device was a special device that dealt with psionic energy pollution. It had to work together to envelop the primordial psionic energy ball. This primordial psionic energy ball that had just been created was still very small and easy to deal with. The expansion speed of this primordial psionic energy ball started to slow down. It went from expanding outwards to shrinking inwards. The entire process lasted for dozens of minutes. This primordial psionic energy ball gradually shrank from the size of a flagship to a sphere with a diameter of 2 to 3 meters. It was still shrinking rapidly. The most common way to deal with psionic energy pollution was to use a special device to compress the volume and increase the energy density, turning it into a psionic energy seed. This method was relatively clean and did not have many side effects. The only problem was that it took a long time. Furthermore, when the psionic energy expanded to a certain extent, it would not be easy to deal with it. Right at this moment, a figure floated out of the primordial psionic energy ball. It was God. Not only was he completely unharmed, even his hair was not messed up. He was even carrying the Kundi race commander, who was still alive and kicking. The entire flagship had been swallowed by the primordial psionic energy ball, and only the two of them were still alive. You. The Kundi race commander stared at God with his eyes wide open. Originally, he was prepared to die and wanted to perish together with the enemy. However, at this moment, he did not dare to believe what he had just seen. God glanced at him and knocked him out. He then stretched out his other hand and clenched his fist toward the primordial psionic energy ball. Hoo. In the blink of an eye, this primordial psionic energy ball turned into a speck of light the size of a grain of rice, shining with a dazzling blue light. This was a newly formed primordial psionic energy seed. It landed on God's finger like a blue gem, dyeing his finger and face blue. God was holding an unstable super energy source in his hand, but his expression was calm. He looked at it for a while before taking out a spherical storage device and stuffing the primordial psionic energy seed into it. He then gestured toward the Dynasty fleet and told his colleagues to turn off the device that compressed the psionic energy. He then returned to the command ship with the Kundi race commander and the primordial psionic energy seed to meet his superior. Well done. I will personally record this achievement for you. The Dynasty commander personally welcomed God and patted his shoulder. He was clear about God's ability, which was why he chose to let God board the ship. The primordial psionic energy was extremely domineering, and even a beyond grade A would receive continuous high damage from it. However, Esper abilities had always been limitless, and very few Esper abilities could allow the user to survive within the primordial psionic energy. God's Esper ability was one of them, and it had a very special meaning. Before God, the entire universe had only guessed that such a super high-risk Esper ability existed, but there had never been a concrete case. God might be the first Esper ability user to be discovered since ancient times. At the very least, his ability was the closest to this super high-risk Esper ability. On the surface, he was just a super from the Dynasty who had just entered the Calamity grade, but due to the uniqueness of his Esper ability, he had already received the attention of the upper echelons and entered the list of supers to be heavily observed. The Dynasty treated him as a beyond grade A seed and had high hopes for him. Hearing his superior's praise, God was not shocked. He smiled faintly, stopped, and stood aside. His eyes were as calm as an ancient well. No one knew what he was thinking. The Dynasty launched multiple battles at the same time. The Kundi race army was defeated one after another, and the Dynasty's sudden all-out attack disrupted their formation. Everyone, we are losing this war. In the conference room of the Kundi race command ship, the Kundi race leader placed his hands on the table and looked at the upper echelons coldly. Losing the war was within our expectations, but the process was out of our control. One of the upper echelons said with a solemn tone. Our main fleets that were hidden in different locations were accurately attacked by the enemy, and we suffered heavy casualties. This matter is very strange. The enemy seems to have our coordinate. The Kundi race's battle plan was to slowly lure the enemy deep into their territory and lure the Red Empire into their territory. Then, they would attack the enemy's Stargate together with their main fleet hidden in the outside world to cut off the enemy's path of retreat. They would then use the Scorched Earth plan to wipe out as many enemies as possible. However, the Red Empire's precise attacks had already disrupted the Kundi race's strategy. What made them even more terrified was that their intelligence seemed to have been leaked. We can't tell if the enemy is using special observation methods to locate our hidden main fleet or if they have obtained our internal information. If it's the former, then it's fine, but if it's the latter, then our situation is very serious. The enemy may have seen through our Scorched Earth plan and even obtained the coordinates of all our troops, including ours. Someone said with a worried tone. No matter what, we have to prepare for the worst, the Kundi race leader said. Our grasp of quantum network technology is not mature enough, and the enemy's technology is more perfect than ours. Maybe we should give up on this convenient communication technology for the time being. If that's the case, we will be in an even more passive position. Let's not talk about it anymore. It is time to retreat and place our hopes on the Scorched Earth plan. The Kundi race leader said with a deep voice, the only problem is whether the enemy has seen through our Scorched Earth plan. If they have, we will have to make up for it. How? The troops carrying out the Scorched Earth plan have already set off for a long time. Even if the enemy has the coordinates, it will take some time for them to catch up. Thus, as long as we cut off their connection with the command center and shut off the quantum network, cutting off all communication with the outside world, the enemy will lose their coordinates again. Hearing this, the shrimps could not help but nod. This was to turn the troops of the Scorched Earth plan into a blind and deaf ghost fleet. It was not a bad idea. Since the enemy knows of our plan, they will definitely be prepared to deal with it. Even if they do not know the coordinates of the primordial psionic energy, they will be able to discover the location of the psionic energy explosion through observation and quickly deal with it. This way, the effect of the Scorched Earth plan will be greatly reduced, and the enemy will be the first to eliminate it. That's right, our strategy has already failed to a certain extent. The Kundi race leader's tone was resolute. However, we have to try our best to leave as little resources as possible for the enemy. No matter what, we have to make the enemy suffer a certain amount of losses. The upper echelons looked at each other, and no one objected. Seeing that no one had any objections, the Kundi race leader turned on the virtual screen in the conference room, entered his authority, and opened a secret interface. On it, the location and status of all the troops of the Scorched Earth plan could be seen in real time. At this moment, the interface showed that all the troops were rushing to their destination normally and had not been attacked. Everything seemed normal. After confirming that the Scorched Earth plan was operating normally and had not been destroyed by the enemy, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. This was the only backup plan they could count on at the moment. Everyone immediately contacted the executor of the Scorched Earth plan, and the other party's figure appeared on the virtual screen. The upper echelons have orders for you. Change the target location of the psionic energy explosion, cut off the quantum network connection, and shut down all information channels. After the mission is completed, leave the location of the psionic energy explosion, restore the connection, and report back to us. Understood? Understood. After giving a few instructions, the Kundi race leader hung up. After dozens of seconds, the real-time surveillance of the Scorched Earth troops dimmed one after another, and the connection was cut off. Seeing this, one of the upper echelons could not help but sigh. Although this is not the best method, at least this is safer. The Kundi race leader nodded, looked around, and said with a deep voice, "Since the arrangements have been made, we can begin to evacuate. Remember to bring along all the supers that we have captured." At this point, the Kundi race had already decided to recall their troops and disperse. In the previous battle, they had indeed captured a small number of supers and treated them as important experimental materials. They planned to bring them back for research. At the same time, at one of the borders of the Kundi race's territory, a Scorched Earth plan troop was being attacked by the Dynasty's fleet. A Kundi race battleship had already been docked, and the Dynasty's supers were clearing out the enemy soldiers. The captain sealed the door of the command room and hurriedly sent communication requests to the command center. However, there was no response at all. What's going on? Why aren't the upper echelons answering the emergency call? The captain was shocked and enraged. Right at this moment, a cold beam of light slashed through the alloy door of the command room and passed through the captain's body. Whoosh! Ga! The captain screamed and fell to the ground. Blue blood flowed out, and he was only left with half a breath. An Imperial officer holding an alloy blade walked in and looked at the call on the virtual screen. He then looked at the unwilling expression on the captain's face and chuckled before turning off the call. "Don't waste your energy. You won't be able to contact your own people." Hearing this, the captain's eyes widened. Could it be? Swoosh! A cold blade light flashed, and a large prawn head flew into the air. Fresh blood splattered on the cabin wall like a crude abstract painting. Keeping his weapon, the Imperial officer turned around and left. He did not explain his plan to the enemy. This was a compulsory course for the Imperial Army. In fact, Han Shao did not only pass on intelligence. Since he had decided to help, He also passed on the loophole program that he had left in the Kundi race's quantum network to the dynasty for them to control and increase the mission rating. This way, the entire command system of the Kundi race would become the dynasty's plaything. They would not be able to resist at all and could only be manipulated into various positions. Everything that the Kundi race command center saw, including the people they communicated with, was an illusion created by the dynasty. They thought that they had given the order to the Scorched Earth Plan troops, but in reality, they did not say anything. These troops did not receive any orders from the command center. At the same time, the communication between these troops and the command center was controlled by the dynasty. All the information was intercepted, and the dynasty even blocked the communication channels. It was like two deaf people shouting at each other. The Kundi race was completely deaf and blind. The command center thought that the situation was going according to plan, but it was just an illusion created by the dynasty. The command system was paralyzed, and the troops outside were unable to call for help. They could only be slowly swallowed up by the dynasty. Without the support of the Galactic Society, the Kundi race was a crippled star cluster civilization. Their quantum network technology was too weak and could not even withstand a single blow from Han Shao. If it was a normal star cluster civilization in the explored universe, Han Shao would not be able to control their quantum network so easily. The existence of a virtual mechanic was a strategic weapon in terms of intelligence. Furthermore, Han Shao was a peak beyond grade A and had recently obtained perfect mechanical sense. His role in the war was not something that the other four super systems could replace. It was enough to make the enemy not even know how they died. In a part of the galaxy far away from their homeland, the migration fleet carrying all the civilians of the Kundi race secretly turned around and headed back in the direction they came from. However, there was no indication on the star map. The people on the ship did not know that they had returned the way they came from. The dynasty did not have the habit of letting their enemies escape and had already set up a trap to catch them all. The Kundi race had no way of escaping. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.